Who whispers your name in the dark? Who gave lust a name? Who carved it into the bones of history, stamped it onto the breath of sinners, and crowned it with a throne in hell? Asmodeus. The name slithers through time, hissing between the cracks of forgotten scripture, scrawled in the margins of forbidden books, muttered in desperate prayers that go unanswered. It is not just a name, it is a warning, a brand, a curse. To speak it is to summon something ancient, something patient, something that has waited in the shadows while empires rose and crumbled. They say he is the architect of desire, the whisper behind every betrayal, the grin lurking beneath passion's fever. He does not seduce, he owns. He does not tempt, he devours. Those who cross him do not vanish, they are swallowed, leaving only echoes of their ruin. For centuries, his legend has been twisted, masked, rewritten. Some called him a mere spirit of vice, a footnote in demonology. Others glimpsed his true shape, an entity older than scripture, a force that outlasts kingdoms. His fingerprints stain the oldest texts, his shadow lingers in every tale of obsession, every story of love turned to ashes. Think you know what drives a man to madness? Think again. Asmodeus does not grant desire. He makes it a sickness. The lover who cannot sleep without hearing a phantom voice. The priest who sees sin burning in every gaze. The ruler who would trade a kingdom for the touch of a ghost. These are not accidents. These are not mere weaknesses. These are his works. The church tried to burn his name, but fire cannot erase what is written in the marrow of the world. His symbols still flicker in the corners of grimoires, hidden in spells whispered at midnight. The desperate still call upon him, not knowing that once his gaze settles upon them, it never leaves. They say Asmodeus laughs at those who think they can control him. They say he watches from a place beyond fire, where desire is not pleasure but punishment. They say that if you stare too long into his legend, he stares back. And now, you are staring. Tell yourself it's just a name. Tell yourself that words hold no power. Tell yourself you have not already stepped beyond the threshold, that the silence around you is just silence, that no one is listening. Tell yourself, as you turn the page, that the breath at your back is just the wind. The candle flickers. Once. Twice. Then it dies, swallowed by the hungry black. A chill slithers through the room. The air thickens, pressing against the walls, suffocating the space. A whisper, too soft to catch, too close to ignore, curls around the nape of your neck. There is no one here. And yet, somewhere in the darkness, something watches. His name has been spoken in hushed prayers and curses spat through gritted teeth. He is written in ink that refuses to fade, carved into the bones of forgotten ruins. Asmodeus. The name drips with menace, a word that should not be uttered unless one is prepared to be heard in return. They call him many things, the prince of lust, the serpent of desire, the tormentor of the faithful. But titles are masks, and masks are lies. What he is cannot be caged by language. He does not tempt. He infects. The stories say he once tore through the happiness of men like a blade through silk. A king's bride stolen from his arms, taken by invisible hands before the wedding bed could be warmed. 7 husbands, lifeless in their sheets, their bodies untouched, their souls strangled before dawn. A demon lurking just beyond sight, grinning at their ruin. Some claimed he was cursed to love her, bound to a woman he could never have. Others whispered that love had nothing to do with it, that the suffering of men was his feast, their sorrow his wine. And when a traveler, desperate and trembling, cast a spell in the name of Raphael, the creature was driven to the wastes of Egypt. But driven is not destroyed. He waits. He always waits. Some say he was born of fire, that he walked among the angels before the fall. Others claim he was never meant to exist at all, that he is a mistake, an error in the design, something foul that slipped through the cracks of creation. What is known is this: he is older than the words that try to define him. In the ancient lands of Persia, they called him Ishma, the demon of wrath, the madness in the eyes of men who kill without reason, the hunger that can never be sated. He thrived in the heat of battle, in the screams of the fallen, in the silence of a battlefield where only the crows remain. When his name crossed the borders of Babylon, he changed. He twisted. He became something else. Desire sharpened into a weapon. Lust turned from pleasure to disease. He became the shadow at the edge of every forbidden thought, the fire that burns not to warm, but to consume. To the scholars of the Talmud, he was a trickster, a builder of temples, a king with the power to unmake reality. They wrote of him as if he were only another pawn in the war between good and evil, something to be studied and contained. Fools! You do not study a storm. You do not contain a plague. You survive it. Medieval priests scribbled his name in grimoires, desperate to trap him in ink and parchment. They bound him in circles of salt, etched his sigils into the stone of cathedrals, tried to cast him out with Latin incantations. But Asmodeus does not fade. He does not bend. He does not go quietly into the night. His laughter is written in the crumbling ruins of fallen cities, in the cries of lovers who wake to find their passion has turned to rot. He is there in every moment of weakness, every forbidden glance, every touch that lingers too long. And he does not need to drag you to hell. He brings hell to you. His legend has not weakened. His grip has not loosened. Time does not wither what does not belong to time. The ink of modern pages still drips with his name. He is there, lurking in horror films, in whispered myths, in the symbols stitched into blackened banners. Some call upon him willingly. Others, unknowingly. But make no mistake, once he is near, once he has set his eyes upon you, he does not look away. The candle flickers. The flame returns. Something has changed. The sandstorm howls like a wounded god. Winds rage across the barren land, swallowing the horizon, turning the world to dust and shadow. There is no sky. No earth. Only the storm and the thing that moves within it. It does not walk. It does not crawl. It spreads. A sickness in the wind, a whisper in the storm. A presence without form, yet heavy enough to crush the will of men. The desert has known demons before, serpents that coil beneath the dunes, spirits that drink the minds of the weak, but this one is different. It is wrath itself. Ishma. His name is the taste of blood before battle, the heat rising in a soldier's throat as he forgets mercy, as he forgets reason, as he forgets himself. Ishma is not a blade, nor the hand that wields it. He is the madness that makes men swing without fear. The blind rage that burns through the skull, the red mist that drowns the senses. He does not tempt. He does not persuade. He does not need to. When the first blow is struck, he is there. When the second follows, he is stronger. When the killing starts, he is everything. The ancient Zoroastrians feared him more than death. Death was simple, inevitable, a passage. Ishma was something else. He was chaos given breath. He was the crack in the world through which violence poured. And he was never alone. Ahriman, the great lie, the shadow that opposed Ahura Mazda's light, had many servants, drudge, the deceivers, the bringers of corruption. But Ishma was different. He was not subtle. He did not whisper. He screamed. He roared. He tore through minds, through flesh, through empires. Priests of the Avesta feared him because they knew, once his presence was felt, it could not be undone. Words alone could not banish him. Fire alone could not cleanse him. He did not possess. He infected. A seed of fury planted in the heart of a man, watered with envy, fed with resentment, growing in secret until the moment of the kill. And when the blood hit the sand, Ishma was pleased. Time could not bind him. Nations fell, kings died, but his name did not fade. It changed. The winds carried it west, beyond Persia, beyond the great rivers, beyond the temples and fire altars. Ishma became Asmodeus, the thing that lurked in shadows, in scriptures, in nightmares. Wrath was still his weapon, but now it had a sharper edge. Desire. Not the soft kind, not the longing sighs of lovers, not the warmth of entwined hands. A hunger that scalds the soul. A craving that turns men to ruin, that drags them to their knees before an altar they swore they would never kneel to. The lust that raises cities, that crumbles thrones. The Persians had seen him in war. The world would now see him in the bedroom, in the throne room, in the whispered prayers of the guilty. Ishmael was no longer just fury. He had evolved. The first husband is dead before the sheets have cooled. His breath leaves his body in silence, stolen by something unseen. His limbs are unmarked. His face frozen in an expression of horror, eyes wide, mouth slightly open, as if he had seen something in the last flicker of life. Something that should not exist. The second husband dies the same way. And the third. And the fourth. By the time the seventh man is carried from the bridal chamber, the whispers have spread like fire. It is no curse of misfortune, no hand of mortal revenge. It is him. Asmodeus. The name slithers from trembling lips, the warning passed in hushed voices that dare not rise above the wind. He is there, in the dark corners of the house, in the spaces between the candlelight, in the silence that settles before death. He waits. Watches. Smirks. Takes. And no one can stop him. Sarah, the bride of the dead, is untouched. Pure. Alive. And yet cursed. A woman whose wedding bed is an altar to an unseen force. Men who seek her hand seal their fate with the first vow, their lifeless bodies a testament to the presence that hovers over her. Her father dreads the moment another suitor comes knocking. The servants no longer look her in the eye. The walls of her home, once filled with laughter, have become a tomb waiting for its next occupant. And far from her house, far beyond the reach of mortal prayers, Asmodeus grins. He does not kill out of anger. There is no rage in his hands, no wrath in his touch. He kills because he can. Because the torment amuses him. Because the tears of a grieving bride are sweeter than any wine. He does not need to strike them down himself. Their own fear does half the work. The moment they hear the stories, the moment they let doubt sink its claws into their hearts, they are already his. Their love is not strong enough to fight him. Their will is not sharp enough to wound him. And so, he waits for the next one. But then, something shifts. A traveler arrives, a man named Tobias, clutching a charm and a mission. He does not come alone. Behind him walks an angel in disguise, a messenger with knowledge of ancient things, of battles waged before the earth was young. Raphael, the healer, the warrior. The one who knows the trick that can bind even a creature as old as Asmodeus. A fish. A heart. A liver. Smoke curls from the burning organs, the stench climbing into the unseen places where Asmodeus lurks. He does not laugh now. He does not whisper. He recoils, his form twisting, writhing, dragged from the chamber by something more powerful than fire, more relentless than time. The desert calls him back. The sands that once knew his steps now swallow him whole. The grip he held on Sarah loosens. The fear he fed upon dissolves into the wind. For now. Because demons do not die. They do not fade. They wait. The throne is empty. The chamber is silent, thick with the scent of oil and dust, the remnants of something ancient pressing against the stone walls. The scholars do not speak of it often. They do not whisper of what once sat in that chair, of what once ruled without crown or scepter, but with a smile that cut sharper than any blade. He had worn the robes of a king. He had ruled in Solomon's place. Not by conquest. Not by war. But by deception. By a trick so perfect, so insidious, that even the wisest of men had not seen it coming. Asmodeus had taken the throne of Israel. The Talmud does not say how long. Days? Weeks? Years? Time does not move the same way when a demon wears the face of a man. The kingdom had not burned. The temples had not crumbled. And that was the worst part, there had been no fire, no screams, no war in the streets. Only the quiet horror of a people who did not know their king was no longer their own. Solomon had walked the desert, barefoot, exiled, a crownless king cast into dust. His name forgotten, his power stripped away, his prayers swallowed by the silence. And Asmodeus had sat upon his throne, laughing. They say he had been careful at first, that he had played the role well. But then the mask slipped. The arrogance bled through. The gestures became too broad, the smile too sharp, the laughter too wrong. And the scholars understood. Not all wisdom is holy. There are secrets written in the dark. Magic that twists, bends, obeys, but at a cost. Solomon had built a temple with power not entirely his own. He had bound creatures older than the earth, forced them to cut stone, to shape the sacred halls. Asmodeus had not forgotten. He had been bound, shackled, commanded. And when the moment had come, when the slightest opening had appeared, he had taken it. The Talmud tells the story like a warning, a lesson wrapped in myth. But the mystics, the ones who read between the lines, the ones who search for patterns in the spaces between words, they see something more. Asmodeus was not a beast in chains. He was not some mindless force of lust and wrath. He was cunning. He was patient. He knew the ways of kings, the weight of power, the fragile nature of control. And he had played the game better than the wisest man who ever lived. Some say Solomon reclaimed his throne with a ring, a name of God inscribed upon it, a binding force strong enough to drive the demon back into the shadows. But others, the ones who do not sleep so easily, the ones who wake with the echo of laughter ringing in their ears, they wonder. If Asmodeus sat upon the throne once, who is to say he has not done it again? Or worse, who is to say he ever truly left? The priest grips the iron cross so tightly that his knuckles turn white. The candlelight flickers, long shadows twist and curl against the damp stone walls. The air is heavy, thick with something unseen, something ancient. A presence that does not belong in a house of God. He whispers the prayer, voice trembling. Latin verses spill from his lips, each word a desperate plea. The sacred words have power. They must have power. But the thing in the darkness does not recoil. It does not flee. It watches. It waits. And then, it laughs. Not a roar. Not a shriek. A low, knowing chuckle, the sound of something amused. Something that has heard these prayers before. Something that is not afraid. The church is no sanctuary. The symbols on the walls hold no weight. The priest can feel it now, pressing against him, crawling beneath his skin, whispering secrets he was never meant to hear. Asmodeus. The name was written in old manuscripts, scrawled in the margins of sacred texts, scratched into the stone of forgotten cathedrals. A name that should not be spoken, for even the sound of it was an invitation. They had called him many things. The demon of lust. The prince of corruption. The great tempter of kings and monks alike. But those were names for the blind. For those who needed simple evils, who feared only the sin of flesh and desire. The truth was worse. He did not tempt, he unraveled. He did not whisper sweet nothings, he dug into the bones of men, cracked them open, and let them rot from the inside. In the medieval texts, the scholars tried to describe him. They painted him with bestial features, gave him 3 heads, bull, man, ram, as if wrapping his image in monstrosity could lessen his horror. They chained him to the deadly sin of lust, bound him in the language of damnation. But chains could not hold what did not want to be held. Asmodeus moved through monasteries, unseen. He did not need to force the fall, he let the desire fester, let it grow like a sickness. He turned holy men into liars. He made kings betray their queens. He took the strongest vows and set fire to them. They say he was there, grinning, when the great churches collapsed, when men of God tore each other apart in their own sacred halls. They say his hand was in the whispers that led to war, in the madness that turned faith into bloodshed. He did not fight with swords. He did not need to. He was patience. He was decay. And he is not gone. The priest is still praying, still clutching his cross as if it will save him. The laughter does not stop. It fills the space between his words, coils around his breath. Because Asmodeus does not leave. He never does. The night is heavy with silence. A thick, oppressive stillness presses against the walls of the ancient madrasa, the scent of old parchment and burning oil lingering in the air. A lone scholar sits hunched over his desk, the dim glow of a flickering lantern casting restless shadows across the room. His fingers tremble as he turns the page, eyes darting over the delicate script, ancient ink whispering secrets meant to stay buried. The words before him are not ordinary. They breathe. They pulse. They hiss warnings from a time when men feared what lurked beyond the veil. Asmodeus. The name slithers between the verses, a foreign tongue twisting within Arabic letters. It should not be here. It should not exist within these sacred texts, nestled between lines of wisdom and law. But it does. A cold sweat beads on his brow. His heart pounds against his ribs as he reads on, drawn deeper into the ink-black abyss of forgotten lore. The words speak of a creature bound in chains, an entity older than the desert winds. They speak of Solomon, the great king, the master of jinn, and the demon who dared to wear his crown. The scholar's breath catches. He knows the tale. Every child does. The story of how the mighty prophet Solomon, given dominion over the spirits, once controlled beings beyond human understanding. With a ring of divine power, he commanded legions of jinn, beings of smokeless fire, creatures who could walk unseen among men, who could whisper into the minds of kings and beggars alike. But there was one among them who did not bow. A being who waited. Who watched. Who took. The texts are cryptic, fragmented, riddled with half-truths and lost meanings. Some say the demon was named Sarka, the trickster jinn who usurped Solomon's throne. Others call him Asmodeus, a shadow lurking between myth and reality, a name so venomous that it stains even the purest tongues. The scholar exhales, the room growing smaller around him. His pulse pounds against his skull as he reads on. The scriptures speak of deceit, of an illusion so perfect that it fooled even the wisest of men. Asmodeus, they say, did not arrive with fire and fury, he slithered into power, unseen, unnoticed, slipping into the very heart of divinity. For days, weeks, months, no one knew. No one questioned. The demon ruled. He wore the king's face. He spoke with his voice. And the kingdom, blind to the silent corruption, obeyed. The scholar grips the edges of the manuscript, his fingers whitening. If this is true, if even Solomon, the chosen, the beloved of God, could be deceived, then what hope is there for ordinary men? What defenses exist against something that does not strike, but waits? That does not force, but becomes? A gust of wind rattles the wooden shutters. The scholar stiffens, his skin crawling. The oil in the lantern flares suddenly, a brief surge of light before it settles into an uneasy flicker. The silence presses down, thick and listening. He dares not turn around. Because if the texts are right, if Asmodeus is more than legend, then he never truly left. The wind howls through the ruins, slipping between shattered stones and fractured pillars, carrying with it the echoes of something ancient, something waiting. The scent of charred incense lingers in the air, the remnants of offerings made to gods long abandoned. Beneath the weight of a blood-red sky, the Euphrates crawls like a sluggish serpent, dragging with it the whispers of the past. A priest stands before a ziggurat, his robes heavy with dust and old prayers. His hands tremble as he lifts the carved tablet, the cuneiform etched into its surface almost glowing under the dying sun. He does not speak the name, he dares not, but it is there, coiled between the words, a presence so thick that it presses against his ribs, tightening, choking. Lamashtu. Pazuzu. Anzu. The demons of Babylon, their names chiseled into the bones of history, each one a force of hunger, of disease, of violent, insatiable need. But among them, something more lurked. A shadow that did not merely destroy, but twisted. A force not content with slaughter, but with possession. The priests had whispered of it, their voices hushed even in the presence of the gods. The entity that did not merely afflict the body, but reached into the marrow of the soul. A being with 100 tongues, 1,000 eyes, and a hunger so consuming that it bled across civilizations, morphing, shifting, wearing new faces with each age. Its earliest form was never meant to be spoken aloud, but the Akkadians had known it well. They called it Ashmadu, the demon of fury. A force of madness, of blind, ravenous desire. It did not merely burn with rage, it fed on it, grew stronger from it, sank its claws into the minds of men and turned them into vessels of their own ruin. He stares at the tablet in his hands, the inscriptions trembling beneath his gaze. His heartbeat is a war drum in his ears. This thing, this Asmodee, it had not died with the old gods. It had not crumbled with the temples or been swallowed by the sand. It had simply changed. A shriek rips through the silence, and the priest stumbles back, the tablet slipping from his grasp and shattering against the stone. The wind roars in his ears, and for a moment, just a moment, he feels it. A breath that is not his own. A presence curling around his spine, pressing, whispering, grinning. He does not turn around. He does not need to. Because Asmodee is already here. The candle sputters, its flame clawing at the darkness, barely holding back the abyss that waits beyond its glow. The scent of melted wax lingers in the stale air, thick with incense, sweat, and something far older, something that breathes beneath the surface of this world. The scholar leans over the manuscript, his fingers trembling as they trace the ancient ink, the words burned into brittle parchment. His pulse thrums in his throat. He should not be reading this. A single name glares up at him, sharp, jagged, a wound torn into the page, Asmodeus. The candle flickers violently, though there is no wind. He swallows. The 7. The great princes of hell, each a king of ruin, each a force so absolute that even the damned fear to speak their names. Lucifer, the fallen morning star, wrapped in his own cursed pride. Mammon, the devourer, drowning in endless greed. Leviathan, cooled in envy, a serpent beneath the tides. Satan, the great adversary, boiling with wrath. Beelzebub, the carrion lord of gluttony, feasting on rot. Belphegor, the tempter, sinking all into the void of sloth. And Asmodeus, lust incarnate. The hunger that cannot be quenched. The flame that does not burn, but consumes. A distant sound, a shuffle, a breath, and the scholar jerks his head up. The shadows seem thicker now, closer. His lungs tighten. He tells himself he is alone. But the manuscript pulses beneath his touch, and the ink seems to bleed, shift. Lust. The word is too small for what Asmodeus is. He is not passion. He is not love. He is hunger, stretching across time, slithering into the minds of kings and beggars alike. He does not whisper, he demands. He does not seduce, he dominates. He does not tempt, he corrupts. The scriptures tell of Solomon, the wise king who built a temple, who commanded spirits, who stood as the greatest of men. And yet, even he was no match for Asmodeus. The demon did not come with fire and blood. He came with a smile, with laughter, with a voice so sweet it could rot the bones. He crept beneath the king's skin, whispered into his soul, twisted his desires until he fell, until the temple itself crumbled beneath the weight of lust's triumph. The scholar exhales, his breath unsteady. Asmodeus does not shatter kingdoms. He sinks into them, lets them rot from within. He stands among the princes of hell, yet he is unlike them. Lucifer rages against heaven, but Asmodeus does not care for war. His battlefield is the flesh, the mind, the whispers in the dark that drive men to their knees. And he is here. The candle flares, then dies. The darkness is not empty. The room is thick with silence. The air is heavy, almost suffocating, as the moonlight filters through the window, casting long, twisted shadows that seem to stretch across the floor like reaching hands. The candle flickers, its light wavers and dances, teasing the edge of darkness, threatening to die. But it does not. It is drawn to something. Something that is not seen, but felt. The woman stands in the corner, trembling, her eyes wide, her chest rising and falling with each shallow breath. She does not know why she is afraid, not exactly. There is no sound, no movement. And yet, her skin crawls. Her pulse quickens. She turns slowly, her gaze searching, fearing, but there is nothing. Except for the whisper. It's so quiet at first, she thinks she might have imagined it. A soft, seductive sigh against her ear. A voice like silk, dark and deep, curling around her like smoke. "I can see you," it says. Her heart stops. She cannot move. Her eyes widen, terror seizing her throat as the presence in the room grows stronger, more real. The whisper is no longer a sound, it is a force, pressing against her, filling her with a longing, a hunger that has no name. She is not the first. She will not be the last. Asmodeus. The name slithers through her mind, heavy as lead. It pulls at her, pulls her deeper into the sensation, into the rawness of desire that twists like a flame, so hot, so unbearable, that it consumes everything. He does not come with fire. No. He is the smoldering heat, the slow burn that eats away at everything within, that turns the heart to ash and leaves nothing but emptiness. The sin of lust. This is what Asmodeus is. This is what he has always been. The sensation of longing, of need, of an emptiness so deep it can never be filled. The world spins with it, and he is the center. He is the burning core of every desire, every passion that moves beneath the surface of humanity, twisting it until it breaks, until there is nothing left but the overwhelming urge to consume, to be consumed. Lust is not a mere act, it is a force. A force that drives men to madness, that makes the body betray the soul, that binds them in chains stronger than iron. Asmodeus is not a tempter, he is the tempter's very essence, the thing that pulses inside the chest, the hunger that whispers in the mind, the need that never quenches. It is said that Solomon, the wisest of kings, fell victim to him, that he was ensnared by a woman, a seductress who was more than she seemed, for behind her eyes was a presence, a being who waited. And Solomon, great and proud as he was, gave in, for how could he not? How could any man stand against the quiet hunger that gnaws at his very bones? And when he gave in, when the last shred of resistance melted beneath the weight of desire, Solomon's kingdom shattered. Not because of an army, not because of treachery, but because of the most human thing there is, the loss of self in the pursuit of something so primal it devours all reason, all thought. Asmodeus is that loss. He does not need to roar. He does not need to demand. He simply exists, wrapped in desire, a presence that permeates the very fabric of the world. He is in the flesh of every person who reaches for what they should not have, who indulges in what they cannot control. He is the slow burn of the forbidden. He is the temptation that lingers even after the moment has passed, the desire that cannot be quenched, no matter how much one gives in. How easy it is, then, to forget that in giving everything to him, there is nothing left to be given back. Lust does not offer salvation. It does not offer peace. It only takes. And Asmodeus, he is the one who takes it all. He does not stop until every drop of soul is consumed, until there is nothing left but the hollow, aching desire for more. This is not about love. This is not about connection. This is about destruction. The slow, agonizing destruction of everything that makes a person whole. The woman shivers, her legs trembling beneath her, a single thought slipping through her mind like a knife. What will he ask of me next? But she knows the answer. She knows it already. Lust is a cruel master, one that does not care for boundaries, for decency, for what should be. It is the thing that steals your mind, twists your body, and leaves you empty at the end. Asmodeus watches, waiting, his presence slipping into the cracks, the smallest, most intimate corners of the world. He does not come with a roar. He comes with silence. He comes with the whisper of need, the ache of desire. And in that silence, he becomes the world. He becomes everything. Her breath is ragged now, her skin slick with sweat. The weight of his gaze presses against her chest, the need, the hunger, the longing stretching, like fire across her veins. She has heard the stories, of course. But the stories never told her how it would feel, the way his touch burns, the way his name echoes through her soul, calling, always calling. And now, as she trembles, as the last flicker of the candle dies and the shadows swallow her whole, she realizes she has already given in. The price is paid. There is no escaping it. There never was. The room is suffocating with heat. The air hangs heavy, dense with anticipation, and the flickering light of a solitary candle casts grotesque shadows on the stone walls. A faint smell of sulfur lingers, clinging to the thick, stale air. It seeps into the very fabric of the space, creeping into the bones of the men gathered around the altar. They do not speak. Their eyes dart to the center of the room, where the parchment lies, its edges stained with ink, its pages torn by time. A name is written on it. Asmodeus. The name chills the soul. It is not just a name, it is a curse. A summons. The ritual has already begun. The men can feel the temperature drop, an unnatural cold that seeps through their skin, burrowing deep into their veins. The darkness in the corners of the room thickens, pressing against the walls, eager to spill over. And with every whispered incantation, with every delicate stroke of the quill on the parchment, they know he is coming. The air crackles with the tension of the unknown, and every breath feels like a dagger lodged deep in the chest. They have summoned him, willingly or not. And Asmodeus does not respond kindly to those who call his name. He is not a demon who lingers at the edges of reality, content to be observed. No, he steps forward, into the world, into their very souls. And the moment the final syllable is uttered, the world holds its breath. A scream echoes through the stone walls. It is not a human sound. It is a wretched, guttural cry, a sound that is not born of this world, but of a place far darker. The candle flickers wildly, its flame bending like a twisted finger reaching toward the void. It is too late to turn back. Asmodeus stands in the center of the circle now, his presence vast and suffocating. There is no form, no body, just a shadow that stretches and coils like smoke, curling around the men like a noose, tightening with every breath they take. He is in their minds, in their hearts. He is the whisper, the urge, the temptation that twists and bends them to his will. The first man falls to his knees, his face contorted in terror. He cannot scream, for the air is thick with silence. His eyes bulge as his fingers clutch at his chest, as if trying to hold in the parts of his soul that are being torn apart. Asmodeus does not need to speak. His mere presence is a command, a force that consumes, a force that crushes. This is what they sought. This is what they called forth. The others falter. The pages flutter as if alive, as if the words themselves have come to life. The symbols written in ancient tongues twist and writhe, the ink bleeding into the air like an infection. Asmodeus feeds on their fear, on the guilt and the desire they carry within them. It is no longer just a ritual. It is no longer just a test. It is a sacrifice, and the altar is ready to consume what remains of their souls. A spell is uttered. A final prayer, a desperate plea for protection. But Asmodeus does not answer with mercy. There is no mercy in his name. Only hunger. Only darkness. The words have power. They have always had power. But the power of fear, that ancient, primal force that makes men tremble, is something far stronger than any incantation. And Asmodeus, born of that very fear, feeds on it. He is not bound by the rules of men. Not bound by the rituals. He is the one who shapes the rituals. He is the one who bends the magic to his will. The second man falls. Then the third. Their eyes blank, their bodies twisting as if caught in a web of invisible threads. They scream, but there is no sound. The darkness suffocates it, devours it before it even reaches the air. They are gone, their souls lost, consumed in the fires of temptation and terror. The parchment still lies on the ground, the ink beginning to smoke, curling in the air like a final whisper of the damned. This is what Asmodeus does. He is the whisper that calls to the darkness, the force that reaches into the hearts of men and plucks at their very souls. The rituals, the spells, they are mere attempts to control the uncontrollable, to summon what cannot be tamed. But nothing is ever truly in their control. Not when Asmodeus is involved. Not when he claims what is his. The final man stands alone, his hands trembling, his heart thundering in his chest. He knows he is next. He knows that Asmodeus is waiting, circling him like a predator waiting for the kill. The shadows close in around him, suffocating him, making him feel small, insignificant, as though he is nothing more than dust in the wind. The coldness in the air gnaws at his bones, and the hunger, it is unbearable. It is like a presence, a claw that digs into his ribs, tearing at his insides. He can feel it. Asmodeus is there. With one final breath, he whispers a prayer that sounds more like a plea. But it is useless. The words fall from his lips like ash, like dust, and they vanish into the empty air. Asmodeus is already inside him. Blade is raised. A heartbeat. A second. The last thing the man feels is the weight of his own desire. A silence grips the room, the kind of silence that speaks louder than 1,000 screams. The very air quivers with power, dark and ancient, stretching from the depths of the earth, from places where light is an enemy. You know the demon is there, even though you can't see him. He is in the shadows, in the ink, in the ritual you are about to begin. You cannot escape him. He is woven into the very fabric of the cosmos, stitched together with the threads of lust, of temptation, of sin. Asmodeus does not wait, not in the way a human waits. Time bends for him. Power coils around him, a natural thing. He is the second king, a prince among demons. He does not need to scream to be heard, does not need to show his face to make you feel the weight of his presence. His rank is as absolute as his hunger. And as you look down at the page, the one stained with the blood of those who have gone before you, the hierarchies are clear. Asmodeus. He is not just a demon. He is the demon. The one who stands at the heart of Hell's court, one of the 7 princes of the abyss. He is the master of lust, the king of desire, the lord of temptations. His throne is built from the broken hearts of those who have succumbed to their own darkness. The lesser key of Solomon speaks of his power, how he was summoned by Solomon himself, bound by the ancient king's will. But you cannot bind Asmodeus. No, you only invite him in, foolishly, eagerly, as though you could control a storm. His kingdom is one of chaos, and in that chaos, he rules not with a crown of gold, but with the sharp teeth of indulgence and corruption. He whispers promises of fleeting pleasures, of dreams that make you forget your sins long enough to plunge deeper into them. The Ars Goetia, the grimoire of the damned, describes Asmodeus as a demon of unmatched strength, a creature who can unravel the very foundations of a soul. He is not a simple being, not a mindless force. He is a trickster. A master of deception. His very existence is a paradox, beautiful and horrifying, a monster of seduction and destruction. In the hierarchies of hell, he stands with the weight of millennia on his shoulders, an ancient being who knows the true price of temptation. He has seen it all, done it all, and with every act of indulgence, every breach of moral boundaries, his power grows. And when you speak his name, you are not calling upon a mere demon, you are summoning a king, a ruler, a force of nature. The book trembles in your hands, but you cannot stop. You read further, your fingers slick with sweat, your breath shallow. You need to know. You need to understand what has always lurked in the shadows of desire. The temptation that teases the soul, beckoning with promises of release, of gratification. Asmodeus, the prince of lust, rules over it all. He does not simply tempt, he enslaves. He takes what is most sacred to you, binds it in chains of passion, and forces you to dance to his tune. There is no escaping him. Not once you have called upon him. He answers only when you are vulnerable, when your heart is open and your mind is weak. And when he takes you, there is no return. He wraps his dark fingers around your soul, and the more you resist, the tighter he grips. You cannot flee from him. He has already woven his tendrils deep into your heart. He knows you. Knows your fears, your desires, your sins. He is not a stranger to your soul. He is the one who lies beneath the surface, the one who waits for the right moment to pull you under. The room grows colder, darker. Your fingers tremble as you trace the next line of text. Asmodeus is a king, a prince of the infernal host, the one who can be called upon to break the bonds of the flesh and the spirit. You cannot look away. You are drawn in, a moth to the flame. The power of his name calls to something inside you, a longing, an ache, an endless need for satisfaction. And yet, beneath it all, you feel it. The terror. The horror. The recognition that this is not a power to be trifled with. This is not something you can control. He is a master of lust. But he is also a master of destruction. He builds his power through the collapse of the soul, the breaking of every boundary, the erosion of every moral fiber. In his presence, there are no limits. And the worst part is, you want it. Deep down, you crave it. You crave the release, the abandonment, the intoxicating feeling of losing yourself in something so pure, so consuming, that you forget the world around you. You forget who you were, who you are. But Asmodeus does not let you forget. He remembers. He remembers your sins. And he feeds on them, growing stronger with every indulgence. You are nothing but a vessel for his endless hunger. The pages turn, each one more twisted than the last. You know the ritual now. You know what is needed to call him forth. But as the words fill your mind, you feel the weight of their meaning. The consequences. This is not a path you can walk back from. There is no return. Asmodeus will answer. And when he does, the very fabric of your being will tremble under his touch. The air thickens. It's not just the humidity that presses against your skin, no, this is something far darker, far more suffocating. It's the weight of evil, settling into every corner of the room, the house, the soul itself. The room is silent, save for the distant, barely audible creaks in the old floorboards. Silence, yes, but it's not peace. It's the calm before the storm, the unbearable stillness before the madness. And in the shadows, something stirs. A woman, young, once vibrant, is writhing on the floor, eyes rolled back, pupils dilated and unblinking. She is not the same. She speaks in voices that do not belong to her, her voice twisting, warping, as if the very air cannot contain the words coming from her. It's the kind of sound that grinds against your nerves, crawls into your thoughts, burrowing under your skin, unsettling you in ways you can't understand, can't explain. You feel the darkness creeping closer, the tension so thick that you can't breathe without feeling it press against your lungs. And the eyes, those cold, empty eyes, glowing with malevolence, they are not hers. In the air around her, you sense the presence of something ancient, something that knows no mercy. It is the weight of Asmodeus, lurking, waiting. It is no longer a name from history or a whisper in the dark, it is a force, here, now, consuming everything in its path. The exorcist standing at the foot of the woman's trembling body feels it too. The weight of the room has shifted. The demon has arrived. The prayer slips from the exorcist's lips, a fragile, desperate plea, trembling as it leaves his mouth. He's seen this before, the signs of possession, but never like this. Never this deep. This is different. This is something worse. This is Asmodeus, not a demon of petty vengeance or petty rage, but a being of unspeakable power, a being that doesn't simply possess, it takes. It consumes. The woman convulses, jerking violently. The words, the language, that spill from her mouth are no language any human has ever spoken. It's a guttural screech, a twisted, guttural parody of speech, each sound scraping across the air like a knife on bone. The room trembles, the walls seem to lean in closer, and you can feel it now, the overwhelming desire. It's suffocating, drowning the air, leaving nothing but hunger, nothing but that insatiable, consuming hunger that has always marked Asmodeus's touch. But this demon, this Asmodeus, is not content with simply taking over a human body. No, he doesn't need just flesh, he wants the soul. He wants to drag every last piece of it into his abyss, to feast on it, and leave only a hollow shell behind. You can almost see it, the soul of this poor woman, shuddering and recoiling, trying to escape, trying to break free from the claws of a beast that has haunted humankind for centuries. But it cannot. Asmodeus does not let go once he has claimed his prize. The exorcist's voice falters as he calls upon the divine, his words weakening in the face of such ancient power. He knows the danger. He knows that in the face of a demon like this, there is no mercy. There is no respite. Asmodeus is not a demon that allows for a peaceful resolution. He destroys. He corrupts. He drags you into a pit of indulgence and pain and doesn't let go. The woman thrashes on the floor, writhing like an animal caught in a snare. Her screams echo through the house, but they are not her screams anymore. They are Asmodeus's, rising from the depths of hell, twisted by lust and wrath. And still, the exorcist presses on, desperation in his voice, his hands shaking as he recites the final rites. He can feel the eyes of the demon upon him now. Asmodeus is laughing, deep in his chest, the sound of it sending shivers down the exorcist's spine. It's not a laugh of amusement. It's the laughter of a predator, the sound of a beast savoring its prey before the final, terrible strike. The air grows colder. The woman's form twists and contorts, her skin pale and slick with sweat, her eyes rolling back, searching, longing for release. But there is no release. Not here. Not from Asmodeus. He has no mercy for those who fall into his grasp. His power has been honed over millennia, and there is no room for weakness in his world. With one final, shrieking cry, the woman's body goes limp. Silence. The house, the room, the very air, falls into a crushing silence. For a brief moment, there is hope, a fleeting breath of peace. But even as the exorcist moves forward, fear grips his heart, a shadow creeping back into the edges of his thoughts. He knows. He feels it. Asmodeus is not gone. The demon never truly leaves. He simply waits. He watches. And he waits for the next opportunity to claim another soul. The woman's eyes snap open again, and in that instant, the air is thick with a promise of something far worse. Asmodeus is laughing again, this time, in the pit of your stomach, in the bones of your soul, in the very marrow of your being. He never stops. Not once you've made the mistake of calling him. This is the true nature of possession. Not just a body taken, but a soul ravaged, torn asunder by the grip of Asmodeus. And as the exorcist stumbles back, his hands shaking, his faith faltering, he knows what awaits. The demon is still there. He will never leave. Not until the soul is his. And as the exorcism continues, a chilling thought lingers, one that haunts every breath. How many more souls does Asmodeus still claim? The debate is reaching a fever pitch now, the voices rising, cutting through the still air like knives. It's not just a theological discussion, it is a war of words, a clash of beliefs that rips through the fabric of the soul. The room is tense, filled with the stench of sweat and fear, the weight of ancient arguments and nameless horrors hanging over every whispered word. Theologians, scholars, and priests sit at the table, their faces pale, their hands trembling as they speak in hushed tones. But you can hear it, the growing tension in their voices, the palpable dread lurking beneath their words. Asmodeus. One word, one name, and the room falls into a silence so thick, it chokes the air from your lungs. You feel it, the collective shiver running down every spine, as if the mere utterance of his name has summoned him, brought him into the very space they occupy. They speak of him like a shadow that cannot be escaped, an eternal presence that haunts every corner of their faith. He is a symbol of everything they fear, an embodiment of sin, of lust, of destruction. And yet, they cannot ignore him. They cannot avoid him. One voice rises, sharp and cutting, almost a shout. Asmodeus is not the devil, he declares, his voice shaking as he challenges the very nature of the demon. He is but a prince of hell, a servant, a tool used by the true ruler of darkness. He does not represent pure evil, no, no. Lust, yes, he is that. But evil itself? He shakes his head, dismissing the idea as if the words were too foul to even entertain. But his hands tremble as he speaks, betraying the fear that grinds against his very thoughts. The others around him stiffen, their eyes flickering with uncertainty. Another scholar, older and grizzled, leans forward, his eyes burning with a conviction that matches the fire in his soul. No, he growls, his voice a rasp that leaves a trail of ice in the air. You are mistaken. Asmodeus is evil, and that is not to be questioned. Lust is his realm, but he does not stop there. He corrupts the soul, turns the heart to stone, and leaves nothing but the ashes of what once was. His words hang heavy in the air, and you feel the weight of them like a stone pressing down on your chest. There is truth in his voice, a truth that slices through the room like a razor. You can see it in their eyes, the struggle, the disbelief, the fear. Asmodeus is more than they can comprehend, more than they can defeat with their words and prayers. He is not just a demon to be labeled and cast aside. He is the embodiment of temptation, of desire twisted into something far darker, far more insidious than they are willing to admit. Every time they try to speak his name, it feels as though they are calling him forth, inviting him into their hearts, where he will feast, where he will take what he wants, and leave only ruin in his wake. The debate grows louder. Voices clash. Words are thrown like weapons, slicing through the tension, but they never seem to land. They never seem to cut deep enough. Asmodeus remains just out of reach, a shadow that dances at the edges of their reasoning, slipping through their fingers with every attempt to grasp him. One scholar, sweating now, his face pale, whispers in a voice that trembles. But if he is not the devil, then who is he? What does his lust mean? What does it represent? The question hangs in the air, unanswered, and the room shudders under its weight. They all feel it, the truth of the question, the truth they are afraid to face. If Asmodeus is not the devil, then he is something worse. He is the tool of temptation, the harbinger of indulgence, the force that calls forth the darkness in every human soul. The argument circles, each side digging in deeper but neither gaining ground. Theologians and priests, scholars of ancient texts, their minds burning with questions that cannot be answered. They speak of the fall of man, of the serpent in the Garden of Eden, of the ancient and unyielding battle between light and dark. But they cannot agree on Asmodeus. They cannot find peace with him. Is he a demon of wrath or a demon of lust? Is he a fallen angel, or something far older, far more insidious? There is no answer. Only silence. A silence that suffocates, that wraps itself around your throat, pressing tighter, tighter with every passing second. You feel it now, the crushing realization that no one truly understands Asmodeus. Not fully. Not ever. He is too old, too powerful, too woven into the fabric of sin and desire to be reduced to a mere theological debate. He is the abyss that calls, the void that swallows, and the hunger that never stops. As the conversation dies down, the room is left in a silence that feels like an omen. No one dares speak his name again, but you can hear it, echoing in the corners of your mind, growing louder with every breath. Asmodeus is not just a demon. He is a force. He is temptation incarnate, a reflection of every hidden darkness, every unspeakable desire that humanity dares not confront. He is the one who waits patiently, silently, knowing that the more they debate, the closer they come to the truth of his existence. And when they are ready, when their souls are weak enough, he will claim them. He will claim all of them. And so the debate continues, but now it is quieter, the air heavier. Asmodeus has won. Theologians and priests, scholars and saints are no longer sure of anything except the truth of his presence. And in that truth, there is no escape. There never was. The wind howls through the narrow streets, whipping at the edges of the stone buildings, the twilight casting long, jagged shadows. The air smells of damp earth and decay, a heavy reminder that the night is never far from this place. A whisper spreads from one end of the town to the other, crawling through the cracks in the walls, seeping into the bones of every villager. They all know. They all feel it. Asmodeus is coming. It is in the way the villagers speak, their voices low and urgent, as though saying his name aloud might summon him faster. The old women clutch their rosaries, muttering prayers as the men gather their pitchforks, their eyes wide with the fear of something they do not fully understand. It is in their children's wide-eyed stares, the shiver that runs through them when they hear the faintest rustling in the trees. The name of Asmodeus lingers in the air, and though none dare speak it in the light of day, it is there, woven into the fabric of their every thought, their every prayer. Every night, as the moon climbs higher, something changes. The village grows quieter, the streets darker. And somewhere, out in the forest, deep within the folds of the ancient trees, the shadows stir. They shift and twist in ways that cannot be explained. And the stories begin. An old man tells of a noble woman, once pure, who wandered the woods searching for her lost husband. She was never seen again. They say she fell into the clutches of the demon, that Asmodeus himself twisted her heart until she could no longer tell the difference between her desires and her fears. She gave herself to him, body and soul, and when they found her, her eyes were empty, vacant, her body twisted with a hunger that no human could satisfy. She became a thing of nightmares, roaming the woods, looking for others to feed on, her every step a testament to the lust and darkness that Asmodeus had claimed as his own. And then there is the tale of the young knight, strong and handsome, who fell prey to the same temptation. He entered the woods, sword raised high, seeking glory, but Asmodeus had other plans. The demon seduced him with promises of power, of wealth, of women beyond imagination. He gave in, just for a moment, and that was all it took. By the time he was found, he had abandoned everything, the code of honor, the vows of loyalty. His body was there, but his soul was lost, corrupted beyond recognition. Some say he still wanders, trapped in an endless cycle of pleasure and torment, neither dead nor alive, a prisoner to his own insatiable desires. These tales are not just stories, they are warnings. Warnings from generations long gone, passed down in whispers and fearful glances, told around hearthfires late at night, when the wind howls like a distant cry. These stories are Asmodeus' legacy in the hearts of the people, his touch on their very souls. In the corners of darkened rooms, there are murmurs of another legend, one whispered only by those brave or foolish enough to speak his name aloud. It is said that Asmodeus does not merely take what he desires, no, he weaves a deeper, darker magic into the very fabric of those he touches. His influence lingers long after his victims are gone. Women find themselves looking at their husbands with disgust, their love twisting into something foul and perverse. Men find their wives' eyes distant, their hearts as cold as stone. The seed of lust that Asmodeus plants grows, spreading through the blood, through the generations, like an infection that no prayer or exorcism can cure. The children of these cursed families, their eyes are different. They are born with a hunger, an unnameable craving, an emptiness that nothing can fill. They are the legacy of Asmodeus, the living proof of his reach. Even the saints are not safe. The demon's touch finds its way into the hearts of the purest souls, twisting them until nothing is left but a shadow of their former selves. It is the women who suffer most. The tales of them are endless, each one a tragedy, each one a cautionary tale, warning those who would dare let their desires slip even the smallest fraction out of control. One of the oldest tales speaks of a woman who, after a single fleeting moment of weakness, found herself bound to the demon forever. She could not escape, not even in death. Her soul was shackled, her body a hollow shell, forever at Asmodeus' mercy. And then, there are the legends that speak of the men who have made bargains, sold their souls for a glimpse of forbidden pleasure. Their names are lost to time, forgotten in the pages of ancient texts, but their suffering is eternal. They are the ones who dared to make deals with the devil, not understanding the price they would pay. They thought they were clever. They thought they could outwit Asmodeus, that they could have their lust without the consequences. But they were wrong. They always were. The most chilling of these tales speaks of a woman who, once pure and full of life, was seduced by a creature she believed to be a man. He came to her in the night, his eyes filled with a hunger that mirrored her own. But when she awoke, she was alone, empty, as though the very essence of her being had been stolen. In the days that followed, she noticed a change in herself. The desire that had once been dormant in her now surged forth, uncontrollable, burning. She sought others, dragged them into her web, leaving behind a trail of destruction and torment. The demon's touch was deep within her, corrupting her from the inside, until she was as much a part of him as he was a part of her. It is said that even today, her spirit wanders the forest, calling to others with her seduction, leading them to their doom. Her name is whispered with fear and reverence in the village, for they know that Asmodeus has left his mark on her. He has turned her into something unrecognizable, a vessel for his will, a puppet dancing to the rhythm of his dark desires. The people know the price of lust. They know what happens when desire goes unchecked, when Asmodeus is allowed to have his way. And they know that, in the end, the stories are never just stories. They are real. They are warnings. The night grows colder. The wind picks up again, rustling the trees outside the village, carrying with it a promise, a whisper, a reminder that Asmodeus is always watching, always waiting, ready to claim the souls of those who dare let their hearts wander into the dark. The candles flicker in the dimly lit study, casting strange shadows on the walls, their light dancing on the ancient tomes scattered across the desk. The air is thick with the scent of ink, parchment, and a creeping sense of unease. The silence is oppressive, heavy with the weight of something lurking just beyond the pages. In the corner of the room, a single chair creaks. A man sits there, hunched over, the quill in his hand trembling as he scratches out the words that come not from his own mind, but from the darkness whispering at the edge of his thoughts. He can feel it. Asmodeus. The demon, the seducer, the destroyer, clawing at the edges of his sanity, pulling his words from the depths of something primal, something forbidden. He pauses, his breath shallow, as a sudden chill fills the room. His fingers twitch with the memory of the lustful whispers that have plagued him, clawing at the edges of his dreams, his waking thoughts. He is writing not merely about the demon, he is channeling him, becoming him. The very ink he uses to write is tainted, infected with the curse of desire. And still, he cannot stop. Asmodeus has always been there, lurking in the hidden corners of Europe's grand libraries, threading through the blood of its greatest minds. The Renaissance, with its fevered pursuit of knowledge, its lust for power and the forbidden, was ripe for the demon's touch. He lived in the shadows of Europe's finest writers, guiding their pens with his insatiable thirst for pleasure, for indulgence, for destruction. The works of the time, from the epic to the poetic, bear the mark of his influence. The great minds who sought to understand the human soul, who dared to look into its darkest recesses, found themselves staring into the eyes of the demon himself. Asmodeus was no mere myth. He was flesh, desire incarnate, twisting and bending every thought into a reflection of his own dark nature. The works of Christopher Marlowe are stained with his touch. In Dr. Faustus, the tragic figure of Faustus is a mirror to the very desires Asmodeus so skillfully exploits. Faustus sells his soul for knowledge, for power, for indulgence, a bargain made not in the heat of the moment, but as a slow, creeping surrender to temptation. His insatiable lust for more is nothing but a reflection of the demon's own hunger. Marlowe's words drip with the tension of that eternal struggle, humanity caught between its aspirations and the all-consuming, unholy hunger that pulls at the edges of its consciousness. The pact with Mephistopheles is not a mere deal with a demon. It is Asmodeus, whispering in the corners of the mind, coaxing, urging, until the soul is no longer a thing of its own, but a vessel for the very desires that will undo it. Marlowe's Faustus is not the only one to feel Asmodeus' grip. The same demon seeps into the works of John Milton, his influence staining even the righteous light of Paradise Lost. Milton's Satan, grand and tragic, does not rise from the pits of hell alone. He is fed by something darker, something more insidious. Asmodeus lingers in his pride, his ambition, and in the way he turns his back on grace. Milton's grand epic does not simply tell the tale of fallen angels, it is a reflection of the eternal dance between the sacred and the profane. It is the story of the demon in all of us, the lust for more, the desire that blinds, the craving that turns every beautiful thing into ash. Milton's Satan, much like Faustus, is a man, an immortal spirit, locked in a battle with something that burns too brightly, too fiercely. And it is Asmodeus who fans those flames. The demon's whispers are not confined to the grand works of literature. He sneaks into the art of the time, his insidious presence coloring the works of painters and sculptors. The Baroque period, with its emphasis on the dramatic, the excessive, the sensual, was the perfect canvas for Asmodeus' dark influence. Painters like Caravaggio, with his use of light and shadow, captured the dichotomy of human nature, innocence and corruption, light and dark, and in those deep, contrasting colors, Asmodeus found a home. He is there, in the darkness that falls over the faces of his figures, in the shadows that conceal the true nature of every desire, every sin. The candlelight illuminates the bodies, but it is the dark spaces that tell the true story. The poets too, in their fevered passion, fell prey to the demon's touch. The language of seduction, of yearning, found fertile ground in the pens of the great writers of the period. The Rape of the Lock by Alexander Pope, for instance, is a playful yet biting commentary on the seductive power of vanity, a subtle mockery of the desires that consume even the highest of society. Beneath the surface of the glittering world, Asmodeus' influence can be felt, whispering, tugging at the hearts of the proud, the beautiful, and the powerful. It is no longer enough to simply be, one must be desired, sought after, idolized. The lust for attention, the hunger for fame, the twisting of the soul into something unrecognizable, all these are Asmodeus' work. The influence of Asmodeus did not die with the Renaissance. He shifted shape, became subtler, yet his presence continued to haunt every word, every syllable. His fingerprints were found in the world of the theatre, where playwrights spun their tales of love and loss, seduction and betrayal. The lust for power, for beauty, for control, that was his gift to the stage. It was a poison that seeped into every tragedy, every comedy, every play, and in the darkest corners, it always found its way to the hero's heart. It twisted and contorted, a serpent in their chest, until nothing remained but the wreckage of broken hearts, shattered lives, and destroyed souls. And still, the writers wrote. The words kept flowing, the ink kept staining, and the demons kept whispering. Asmodeus remained a figure of fascination, a symbol of the most dangerous part of human nature, the part that could never be satisfied, the part that would always crave more, even as it consumed everything it touched. The chair creaks again, the quill pauses. The man lifts his head, the air heavy with the weight of his own creation. He cannot stop. Asmodeus is always with him. Always in the words, in the ink, in the dark. And as the candle flickers one last time, the quill continues to move, guided by the demon's touch, weaving a story that will never end, a story that will never be forgotten. The moon hangs heavy, a bruised silver crescent, casting a sickly glow through the thick, mist-laden streets of Paris. The air is cold, biting, but it is nothing compared to the chill that runs through your spine as you approach the darkened alleyway. The smell of decay, of old wood, and something far worse, a deep, acrid stench, fills your senses. A figure stands at the end of the passage, leaning casually against the weathered stone wall, the blackness of his cloak blending with the night. His face is hidden, but you feel it deep in your bones, that it is no ordinary man who stands before you. He turns his head ever so slightly. And there, in that brief motion, you see his eyes. They gleam with something ancient, something that shouldn't be in a human face. His smile is subtle, mocking even, but it is also knowing. Ah, you've come, his voice is low, rich with a dark promise. How long have you been searching for me? Asmodeus. The name pulses in your mind like a heartbeat. It is not the first time you've heard it, no, it has haunted your thoughts, whispered in the corners of the grand salons, inked into pages of forbidden books. But this time, it is more than a name. It is a presence, thick and suffocating. The figure in front of you, this thing, is not simply a character in some forgotten myth. He is real. He has always been. And he has come for you. The moment slips into your mind like a curse, sharp and biting, as you remember the works of the French writers who first spoke of him, who brought him to life in the deepest corners of their literature. You think of the great French satirist, Le Diable Boiteau, the very tale that sparked a fascination with Asmodeus. Written by the brilliant Pierre de Marivaux, the story wrapped the demon in a bitter mockery of mankind's vices. In the novel, Asmodeus is not just a shadow, lurking in the wings of the plot. He is a guide, a puppet master, pulling at the strings of human lives. His role as the devil isn't just to torment or seduce, it's to expose. To reveal the hidden desires, the raw, ugly truth that lurks beneath every smile, every polite gesture, every promise made in the light of day. And Asmodeus in Le Diable Boiteau is no simple figure of evil. He is charming. He is witty. He is seductive, not with passion or lust alone, but with something far more dangerous, knowledge. He is a whisper in the ear of the everyman, a seed of doubt, a temptation that doesn't scream indulgence, but rather insight. He convinces the unsuspecting that to truly understand the world, they must accept its most base, cynical truth, that everyone wears a mask, and only in revealing our deepest, most primal urges can we truly be free. Maravos's demon is a cruel mirror, reflecting the worst parts of human nature, and through the eyes of his deformed protagonist, the reader sees those truths laid bare. The genius of the story is not simply in the way Asmodeus manipulates the fates of the characters, it is in the unsettling truth he imparts: humanity's greatest sin is not its cruelty, nor its ambition. No, the true sin lies in the willful ignorance of one's own dark desires. Asmodeus in French literature is not just a monster to fear, he is a mirror, a shadow that reflects the hidden heart of mankind. In the pages of Maravos, he does not just seduce with carnal pleasure. He seduces with a sharp, cutting intellect. He exposes the very essence of human folly. You are not just reading a story, you are facing your own darkness, piece by piece. And it doesn't stop there. No, the demon continues to haunt French literature long after Maravos. The writers of the 18th century, during the Age of Enlightenment, couldn't escape his reach. Voltaire's cynical, ironic tone in Candide is tinted with Asmodeus' influence. The stories that mock the nobility, the church, and the very systems that hold society together come alive through a devilish lens that demands to be questioned. Each page crackles with an energy that is not just rebellious, it is primal. Voltaire's sharp, relentless critique of a corrupted world would be nothing without the temptation of Asmodeus urging his characters to question, to see the world for what it truly is. A world where suffering and desire go hand in hand, and the search for truth often ends in disillusionment. But it is not just through satire that Asmodeus finds his way into the French literary consciousness. The tragic, the sensual, the deeply emotional tales are equally touched by his curse. Writers like Honoré de Balzac weave him into the very fabric of their work. In La Peau de Chagrin, Asmodeus' whispers are felt through the protagonist's destructive yearning for life itself. The more he desires, the more he consumes, until there is nothing left but an empty shell. His hunger for fulfillment becomes a void that can never be filled, a pattern all too familiar to those who dare to chase their deepest desires. The magic, the curse, the devil's work, is not in what is granted, but in what is lost in the process. Even in the works of the Romantics, those who dared to write about the fragility of the human heart, Asmodeus' hand can be felt. The tormented lovers, the tragic figures, they are not merely victims of fate. They are drawn to one another by the cruel strings of a puppet master who whispers that true passion can only be found in destruction. The beauty of love becomes something cursed, something to be consumed, until it leaves only ruin behind. You stand in the alley now, caught in the suffocating grip of his gaze. Asmodeus' smile widens, and your heartbeat quickens in your chest. There is no escape. You know this. You have read it all before. The truth laid bare by the greatest minds of French literature, the knowledge that your desires, your darkest yearnings, can and will destroy you. Yet, you are drawn to him. You have been searching for him in every book, in every story, and now he is here, standing in front of you. His words, his essence, are woven into the very fabric of French literary history. And in this moment, you understand what they truly meant. Asmodeus does not just haunt these pages. He haunts you. The air is thick, heavy with the stench of sulfur, and the ground beneath your feet trembles ever so slightly, as if the earth itself is holding its breath. A whisper in the dark, a voice smooth and enticing, slithers its way into your mind. It's not loud, not demanding, just a soft, irresistible murmur, a thread you can't help but follow. You want more, don't you? The voice asks. And you do. You always have. More of what, exactly? You don't know, but in that moment, you would sell your very soul for it. The offer is too sweet, too alluring to ignore. Everything you've ever dreamed of, power, knowledge, wealth, love, freedom, promises to be yours, if only you take the step. Just one step into the darkness. Asmodeus stands before you, not in his usual grotesque form, but as something altogether more dangerous, a refined, polished version of temptation itself. His smile doesn't reach his eyes, but those eyes glint with a quiet certainty, the kind that knows exactly how weak you are, how much you crave that one thing just beyond your grasp. He doesn't need to say more. His presence alone has already bound you to him. And you know, deep in your chest, that this is not just an offer. It is a bargain. The Faustian bargain, the deal made with the devil, is the oldest story in the world, and Asmodeus has been playing his part for longer than any of us care to admit. You've heard the tales, the warnings, the cries of those who made such a deal. But this time, it is different. This time, you feel it. The cold, sharp edge of temptation is cutting into your soul. You are caught between the hunger for everything you've ever wanted and the realization that, in accepting the deal, you might lose everything you already have. But it doesn't matter. The price is irrelevant. All that matters is that you can have it. You can taste it. You can finally feel alive. He is everything that calls to you. The dark mirror to your desires. He promises nothing you haven't already dreamt of. And yet, the whispers twist and turn in your head, drowning out every other thought. Take the deal. Sell your soul. You will never be this close again. The pact. The bargain. The exchange. It is ancient. It has always been ancient, long before the ink of men's hands graced the first page of Faust. In Goethe's telling, the figure of Mephistopheles tempts the scholar Faust with eternal knowledge, power beyond measure, and ultimate satisfaction. But Faust is never the first. He is only the latest in a long line of foolish souls who believed they could cheat the devil, believing that they could have their cake and eat it too. They never seem to see the trap. The fire of desire burns so brightly in their chests that they cannot notice the chains wrapping around their wrists, their hearts, their souls. In your desperation, in your hunger for more, you would think that this time would be different. You would think that you could play the game, that you could bargain and walk away without the consequences. But Asmodeus has been around far longer than you. He knows how the dance goes. He knows that the first step is always the hardest, the one that costs you everything. You think you are the one in control, don't you? But already, you are falling. And he is watching, waiting, savoring every moment of your struggle. The contract is simple, all for all. What you want, everything, but at what cost? Asmodeus's deal is different from others. He doesn't demand just your soul. No, he asks for something more. He takes what's already yours, what's been buried deep inside you, and twists it. He's not here to corrupt you with base desires or petty indulgences. He's here to corrupt your very essence. To make you question who you were, who you are, and who you will be. He will give you the world, but he will destroy what makes you human in the process. You feel it now, that burning itch deep in your core, the dark little whisper that tells you to give in, to take the deal. You don't need to hear him speak anymore. The weight of his offer is heavy, and you can't escape it. The promise of eternal bliss, of power beyond measure, the sensation of having everything. And it feels so close, so within reach, that you cannot resist. But you should. You should. The contract, the one you think you've signed, has already been forged in the fire of your own desires. Asmodeus doesn't need to trap you with lies, with false promises. He doesn't need to give you any new desires. No, he only awakens what's already there, the hunger you've always kept hidden, buried deep beneath your surface. The moment you begin to want, the moment you say yes, is the moment your soul slips away from you. Each whisper, each breath, pulls you closer to that abyss. You begin to forget what it was like to be human, to feel without yearning, without grasping. Your heart beats faster as the reality sinks in, there is no way out. Asmodeus is not just the devil in the details. He is the deal itself. He is the sin you've been carrying inside you for as long as you've been alive. You think he will give you power, but it will be his power. You think he will give you love, but it will be his love. You will live, yes, but it will be a life in chains. And yet, still, you reach out, desperate, trembling. His fingers are warm as they brush against yours, sealing your fate. He has already won. Asmodeus does not give. He takes. He does not fulfill desires, he devours them. The bargain you think you're making is nothing more than your soul's final surrender. And when you turn around, when you look back, there will be nothing left. Nothing. because he's already eaten your soul. The deal is done. There is no escape. You are his now. The room is dark. Thick, suffocating silence presses against your skin, wrapping around you like a suffocating embrace. And then, a shiver. A cold breath grazes your ear, followed by the softest, almost imperceptible whisper, a voice so smooth, so intoxicating, that it sends a jolt through your body. You don't need to see who it is. You know. You feel it in the pit of your stomach, in the rapid beating of your heart, in the way your skin tingles. You can't move. You don't want to. The very air around you seems to thrum with something ancient, primal, something so deep that it burrows its way into your bones. The whisper grows louder, clearer, don't fight it. You want this. The words slip into your soul, dripping with seduction, laced with the scent of danger, the taste of something forbidden. And you do want it. You feel it. This temptation, this pull, this overwhelming craving to give in. It is more than desire, it is a hunger that has no name, no end. It burns through you, takes over your thoughts, your body. Your hands tremble as you reach out, but there's nothing there. Only air. Except, it's not. There's a presence. Something tangible. Something wrong in the way it feels, not human, but so close to it. A flicker of movement catches your eye, but it's too quick, too slippery, just out of reach. It's there, but not. And then, a warmth. A heat that presses into you, wrapping around your neck like hands, smooth, firm, coaxing. Your breath catches. It's as though you're drowning, caught between the comfort and terror of a dream, where the lines blur, and you're no longer sure what's real and what's not. Don't be afraid, the voice says again, and this time, you know. You know it's not a human voice. It's deeper, darker, like something that has clawed its way up from the pits of hell itself. Asmodeus. The demon of lust, of temptation, of all things forbidden. He is here, now, in your mind, in your body, in your very soul. You want to scream, to run, to tear yourself away from this, but you cannot. The pull is too strong, too absolute. Every instinct, every shred of self-preservation has already been swallowed by the insatiable need to surrender. To feel. To give. Asmodeus is a lover unlike any other. His touch burns, but it's the kind of fire that feels like release, like freedom. He doesn't offer pleasure, he devours it. What you think you crave, he gives, and in giving, he takes. But the price is so hidden, so seamless, that you don't realize the sacrifice until it's too late. The closer you get, the deeper the hunger grows, and soon, you can't remember where he ends and you begin. He is the succubus, the seducer, the shadow lurking in the corners of every lust-filled thought, every forbidden desire. He is not the flesh that tempts you in the night, he is the longing itself, the thing that makes your blood run hot, the thing that turns your thoughts into whispers in the dark. He is the thing you cannot escape, even if you wanted to. He is the culmination of every secret desire, every unspoken wish, and the terrifying knowledge that you will never be able to satisfy them. The intensity is unbearable. It clutches your chest like a vice, twisting, pulling, as you struggle against it, even as you know you won't win. You can't win. Because to win would be to deny him, to deny yourself the one thing you've always wanted, to give in. His presence slides closer, his fingers brushing your skin, sending a ripple of heat that drowns your senses. And then, as if in a dance, a slow, hypnotic movement, he is inside your mind, filling every corner, every crack, pushing out everything else. You can't remember who you were before. You can't remember what it was like to not want him. And then, you realize something terrifying you never did. There are stories of succubi, demonic women who enter men's dreams, seduce them, drain their life force with every kiss, every touch. But Asmodeus, he is no mere succubus. He is the embodiment of that desire, that lust, that hunger that never ends. He is both male and female, a creature of seduction and destruction. A lover who only gives to take. A shadow that will always be with you, always lurking just beyond your reach, promising to fulfill you, only to leave you empty. Empty and wanting more. But this isn't just about sex. This is about control. Power. The sheer, terrifying grip of someone who understands your every weakness, your every need, and uses it against you. Asmodeus doesn't need your consent. He doesn't need your permission. He takes what you give, and then he takes more. Until you are nothing more than a hollow shell, craving the next hit, the next touch, the next kiss, the next whisper. Let go, he murmurs, and you do. You have no choice but to let go. To fall deeper into him, into the abyss that waits beneath his voice, beneath his touch. And when you think you have finally given everything, when you think he has finally filled you with all he has to offer, you realize that he will never be enough. Because Asmodeus isn't about pleasure. He is about consumption. He is about insatiability. The more you give, the more you need. And the more you need, the less you are. And yet you fall, again and again, knowing it will destroy you. But in the darkness, in that place where you lose yourself, there's a comfort. A twisted comfort in knowing that Asmodeus will always be there. That he will always come back to claim what is his. You never truly escape him. Not when you're awake. Not when you dream. Not even when you beg him to stop. Because he is not just a lover. He is your addiction. And once you've tasted him, you can never walk away. The candle flickers, its dying light casting twisted shadows across the room, curling and reaching like fingers from another world. The air is heavy, thick with the scent of old paper and dust, suffocating the very breath from your lungs. You can almost hear the walls groan under the weight of forgotten memories, the echoes of tortured souls, bound to this forsaken place. And then, a whisper. Soft at first. A breath against your neck, cool as death itself. It is him. Asmodeus. A name spoken only in hushed tones, a word of fear, a word of longing. His presence, indescribable, suffocating, creeps over you, wrapping itself around your mind like a cold, iron chain, pulling you deeper into the pit. You can feel him, just beyond the edges of your awareness, lurking in the corners of your thoughts. But you can't escape. No one escapes Asmodeus. Not in life, not in death. The stories of him swirl around you, unspoken, yet you can hear them all the same. They claw at the edges of your sanity, each word, each image, each thought like an icy shard of glass pressed against your skin. He is the embodiment of temptation, of damnation. His very name carries the weight of ruin. In the darkness of the Gothic novel, where madness and despair bleed into one another, he is the shadow that stretches across the page, the figure that haunts the imagination. He is the lover who comes only to destroy, the seducer who never shows his true face. His form shifts in the flickering candlelight, always changing, always just out of reach. But he is always there. Always watching. Always waiting. You can feel the tension in every word, in every sentence of the Gothic texts. The stories are laden with despair, with the promise of an ending that never comes, a torment that never relents. Asmodeus is not a hero, he is the villain. But in the darkness of his villainy, he becomes something far more dangerous. He is the mirror that reflects your darkest desires, the temptation that you cannot resist, no matter how much you try. In the pages of romantic literature, his presence is more insidious. He does not simply haunt the minds of men, he speaks to their hearts. He is the lover who draws them into his embrace, but only to ruin them. The heart, in all its vulnerability, becomes the battleground for his seduction. It is not the body that he craves, it is the soul. He seeks to tear apart the very essence of the human spirit, to strip away everything that makes you you. The romantic writers, with their passion for the extremes of emotion, understood the danger of Asmodeus all too well. They knew the delicate balance between love and obsession, desire and destruction. In the pages of these novels, Asmodeus is not a simple demon. He is a reflection of the self, the darker side of human nature that refuses to be denied. He is the uncontrollable yearning, the passion that burns so bright it consumes. And like all great tragedies, his influence is inevitable. It cannot be escaped. In the works of the Gothic and Romantic masters, Asmodeus is not just a force, he is the very thing that drives the plot, that pushes characters toward their doom. He is the seduction of the unknown, the temptation that whispers in the darkest corners of the heart. As the characters move through the shadows, they can feel him. His presence is not always seen, but it is always felt. He is the force that lingers, just outside of reach, pulling at the very fabric of their souls. But even as they try to flee, to escape, they know, deep down, that they cannot outrun him. There is no escaping the pull of Asmodeus. He is the darkness that drives them mad, the longing that tears them apart. And in the end, they are always drawn back to him. The endless cycle of desire and destruction, the lust for the forbidden, the craving for something that can never truly be had. Asmodeus is not just a demon. He is the embodiment of the human condition itself. He is the lover who will never satisfy, the desire that will never cease. He is the fear of being consumed, of losing yourself in the very thing you crave. And in the end, when all is said and done, when the last candle has flickered out and the shadows have swallowed you whole, he remains. The words echo in your mind, long after you have closed the book, long after you have walked away from the page. You cannot forget him. You cannot rid yourself of him. He haunts you, not as a figure in a story, but as a part of you. A part of everyone. He is the thing that lingers in the silence, in the dark corners of the mind. He is not just a creation of literature. He is a force, a presence that exists in the deepest recesses of the human soul. And though you may think you have escaped him, think you have outgrown the pages of Gothic and Romantic literature, you are wrong. Asmodeus never leaves. He is the darkness that always remains, the desire that always burns. The screen flickers. A low hum vibrates through the room, seeping into the bones like the first chill of an open grave. Shadows stretch, bending and twisting as if something unseen lurks just beyond the edges of perception. The glow from the television is the only light, casting a pale, artificial shimmer across the motionless furniture. And then, movement. Not on the screen. In the corner. A breathless pause, the kind that drags eternity into seconds, stretching time into something unnatural. Something wrong. The sensation of being watched crawls up the spine, settles into the base of the skull, and tightens like unseen fingers. Asmodeus. His name has slithered through the ages, whispered in the cracks between reality and nightmare. He is the terror that bleeds through celluloid, the slow, creeping dread that coils itself around modern horror and fantasy like a serpent tightening its grip. He is no longer bound to scripture, to ancient texts gathering dust in forgotten cathedrals. Now, he flickers across movie screens, hides in the pages of bestsellers, manifests in the nightmares of those who never knew they had called for him. He is in the exorcisms, the unholy possessions that twist the innocent into grotesque, snarling husks of themselves. He is the reason priests sweat beneath their collars, why their trembling hands clutch rosaries so tightly that they leave imprints in the skin. His name is scratched into wooden doors, into the flesh of the desperate, into the minds of those who thought they were safe. The camera pans, slowly, too slowly. A character moves through a dimly lit hallway, each step heavier than the last, breath hitching in a throat that already knows it's too late. The audience knows it, too. They feel it in the marrow of their bones, that unbearable inevitability. Asmodeus is waiting. He is always waiting. He is the villain who does not simply kill. That would be mercy. No, he lingers, he corrupts, he stains. He is the reason a mother wakes in the dead of night to find her child staring at the ceiling, whispering words in a language they have never learned. He is the presence behind the mirror, where the reflection does not quite match the movements of the body. He is the smile on a stranger's lips that stretches too wide, revealing too many teeth. Modern horror has turned him into something more than a demon. He is no longer just a tormentor, he is temptation itself. He offers power, knowledge, desire. The devil at the crossroads has become a CEO in a high-rise, a charming man in a tailored suit offering contracts written in blood. His voice is smooth as velvet, his promises dripping with honey and poison in equal measure. And the worst part? People still say yes. Fantasy has not spared itself from his influence, either. In dark, sprawling sagas, he slithers into the hearts of kings, whispers into the ears of sorcerers, bends the will of the most righteous into something blackened and unrecognizable. He is not the beast with horns and scales, he is the trusted advisor, the lover who lingers just a little too close, the voice that says, just one taste. Just one choice. It never ends with just one. In books, in films, in the depths of the human mind, Asmodeus has evolved. He does not chase, he waits. He does not demand, he suggests. He does not take, he lets you offer yourself to him, piece by piece, until there is nothing left but him. And when the credits roll, when the last page is turned, when the lights flick back on and the world seems safe again, his presence lingers. In the reflection of the blackened screen. In the whisper of static. In the silence that is not truly silent. He is there. Always. The air is thick with something unseen, something felt rather than heard. A presence, warm, electric, predatory. The candlelight flickers, stretching shadows into unfamiliar shapes along the walls, shifting them just enough to unsettle. There is no wind, no open window, yet the flames dance, responding to something else. Someone else. A voice, low, rich, dripping with something dangerous, speaks a name. Your name. It is neither a command nor a plea. It is a summons. The body reacts before the mind can protest. A slow turn of the head. A glance over the shoulder. And there, lounging in the dim glow, is a figure so perfectly composed, so intoxicatingly poised, that resistance feels like an insult. A smirk, the kind that speaks of untold pleasures, of whispered promises, of things meant to be sins but feel like salvation. Asmodeus. The name is more than a legend, more than folklore whispered in fearful reverence. It is instinct woven into the fabric of human desire, a presence lurking beneath the polished surface of self-control. He is not merely a demon, he is the whisper of indulgence, the shudder of longing before lips ever meet, the shiver of temptation just before it is tasted. Jung would have called him an archetype, a fragment of the collective unconscious, the embodiment of something primal and inescapable. He exists in myth and mind alike, in stories passed down through trembling lips, in dreams that wake the body drenched in sweat. He is the forbidden pleasure, the intoxicating unknown, the force that makes saints falter and the righteous forget their prayers. To deny him is to deny the darkness within oneself. Psychology has spent centuries trying to define him, dissecting the way the human soul bends in his presence. Freud would have called him repression made flesh, the unspoken desires clawing their way to the surface. Others see him as the anima or animus, seduction given form, the embodiment of the lover lurking in the depths of the subconscious, waiting to pull the unsuspecting into a slow, inescapable descent. He does not force. That is not his way. He offers. He lingers. He lets you come to him, lets you step closer, lets you shudder as you cross the threshold willingly. And then he smiles. The heart beats faster. Not with fear, not yet. First comes the longing, the inexplicable need to move toward him, to fall into the warmth of his gaze, to press against the heat of his skin. The pulse races, the breath shortens, the body betrays its own supposed purity. And then, only then, does the fear come. Because the realization is slow, creeping in like a tide, relentless and unstoppable. He is not real. He should not be real. He is myth, legend, an idea, an old story told to keep the faithful in line. But he is here. And he is waiting. He is the shadow in the mirror when no one stands before it. He is the weight at the end of the bed in the darkest hours of night. He is the dream that feels too real, the touch that lingers long after waking, the voice that murmurs in the silence, teasing, coaxing, calling. No exorcism can erase him. No holy water burns his skin. He does not flee from crucifixes or the trembling hands that wield them. Because he is not outside. He is within. He has always been within. To banish him is to banish a part of oneself. And so he waits. Smiling. Always smiling. The candle burns low, wax dripping in slow, deliberate tears onto the wooden table. The room is silent, save for the sound of breath, ragged, uneven, held too long in the lungs before being forced out in a desperate sigh. The air is thick, stagnant with something unspoken, something that lingers between the ribs, pressing against the heart. A book lies open, pages trembling from an unseen current, yet the windows are closed. The words within are scripture, yet they feel anything but holy. Somewhere in the darkness, he watches. Not with malice. Not with fury. But with amusement. With knowing. The name is whispered, a prayer or a curse, it no longer matters. Asmodeus. He is here, yet not here. Felt, but unseen. His presence coils in the pit of the stomach, in the aching pull of something forbidden, in the weight of hands that long to reach out but remain clenched in trembling fists. He does not need to speak. The thoughts are already planted, blooming in the fertile soil of repression, watered by shame. He has been here before, always. He stood behind the priest who closed his eyes too long in confession, feeling the warmth of breath that should never have been so close. He sat in the back of the church where the bride trembled, not from fear of damnation, but from the longing for hands that did not belong to the man waiting at the altar. He lingered in the flickering candlelight of a scholar's room, where a trembling hand hovered over a passage too sinful to be read aloud. He does not force. He never forces. He merely reveals. The mind wages war against itself, twisting, tightening, writhing in its own contradictions. Desire is wicked. But does it not prove one is alive? The body is a temple. But does it not burn with something undeniable? One must resist. But how can one resist what is already within? The walls of repression are high, built stone by stone with the weight of doctrine, of expectations, of whispered warnings in the ears of children before they understand why they should be afraid. Do not touch. Do not want. Do not hunger. The words carve themselves into the skin like commandments, but the body does not listen. The body knows. And he waits. In the stillness of night, when prayers are whispered through clenched teeth, he listens. When hands grip bedsheets too tightly, he watches. When lips part in silent cries for salvation, he smiles. Not because he is the cause. No, he never needed to be. He is merely the reflection in the mirror when the mask slips, the voice in the silence when denial begins to crack. He is the whisper of truth in the ear of the devout, the undeniable reality that no one is immune to longing. And oh, how the righteous tremble when they realize they are no different from those they condemn. They curse his name. They write him into stories as a warning, a creature lurking in the shadows, a corrupter of innocence. They paint him with horns and claws, drape him in fire and damnation, but they never truly drive him away. Because he is not outside. He is within. And when the struggle breaks, when restraint shatters and the weight of repression finally gives way, he is there. Not to mock. Not to scorn. But to welcome. The air is thick with incense, cloying, suffocating. The room flickers in candlelight, shadows stretching long and thin across the stone walls. A woman kneels, her hands clasped so tightly they tremble, her lips forming silent words, prayers, confessions, desperate pleas. Behind her, the robed figures watch. Eyes dark with judgment. Hands tight around their books, their beads, their weapons of righteousness. She is the sinner. The accused. Her body is to blame, they say. Her curves, her softness, her warmth. The way she moves, the way her breath hitches, the way her skin flushes beneath even the lightest touch. She has drawn the gaze of men, tempted them from their paths, led them into ruin. It is not their fault. It is hers. The demon is inside her, they say. The words lash against her like whips. Whispered. Shouted. Written in the margins of holy books, etched into laws, carved into the minds of those who will never see her as anything but dangerous. Asmodeus. They name him again and again, like an incantation. The corrupter. The seducer. The fiend who slips into beds at night, who drapes himself in the scent of sweat and longing, who turns men into beasts with nothing but a glance. But it is not his name they fear, not truly. It is hers. She meets their eyes, and the silence is deafening. She knows. She has always known. They do not fear the demon. They fear her. It is easier to blame a devil than to admit the truth. Easier to name him the tempter, the whisperer, the shadow in the night, than to face what burns within their own flesh. He is the scapegoat, the excuse, the absolution for sins they cannot bear to claim as their own. But she carries the weight of them all. The books say that Asmodeus despises women, that he kills brides, that he punishes the lustful. But the books were written by men. And men have always been afraid of what they cannot control. She smiles, and the candles flicker. The air shifts. The silence hums with something unspoken. Because she is not afraid. And the demon is watching. The candle is nearly burned down to its base. The wax drips slow, thick, pooling like blood on the edge of the wooden table. The air is too warm, too still. She can feel the weight of unseen eyes pressing against her skin. Her breath is ragged. The words on the pages before her blur and shift, old ink crawling under her gaze as if alive. Warnings written centuries ago. Warnings meant to keep people safe. Keep them pure. Keep them from him. Asmodeus. She grips the book tighter, knuckles paling. Her pulse pounds in her ears, a dull roar beneath the silence of the room. She shouldn't have read this far. Shouldn't have let the words sink into her bones. But it is too late now. The warnings do not scare her. Not the way they should. They say lust is a fire, hungry, insatiable. A single spark is enough to set the world ablaze. And in the smoke and ruin, he waits. They speak of him in hushed tones, voices dripping with fear, thick with reverence. The stories change, the faces of his victims blur with time, but the message remains. He does not come in the form of a beast, though they wish he did. It would be easier that way. No. He comes as a whisper against the skin, warm, inviting. A presence in the dark, just at the edge of awareness. He wears desire like a second skin, shifting and perfect, mold from the deepest wants buried in the corners of the mind. He is temptation itself, the thing they tell you to fear and yet crave in the same breath. And that is why they hate him. Because he does not force. He does not steal. He does not chain. He waits. Waits for the moment when the mind fractures beneath the weight of its own denial. When the whispers become too loud, when the hunger swallows restraint. When hands tremble and breath comes short and the body betrays the soul. And then, only then, does he step forward. They call it possession, but it is not. It is surrender. She shudders. Her body is hot, her throat dry, yet something cold lingers in the space between her ribs. A terror that has no name. They have always feared lust. Not because it is monstrous, but because it is honest. Because it strips away the masks, the lies, the chains wrapped tight around the spirit. It is raw, untamed. It is hunger and need and pleasure wrapped in the language of sin. And sin must have a master. The church walls stand tall for a reason. The sermons echo loud, the ink of the scriptures never fades. They build their defenses high, sharpen their weapons, clutch their rosaries tight. Because they know he cannot be killed. He lives in every shuddering breath stolen in secret. In every gaze that lingers too long. In every dream that leaves a person waking in shame, heart pounding, body burning. He does not need to appear in the flesh. He is already inside them. The candlelight flickers, its weak glow barely pushing against the darkness that presses in from all sides. She can feel him, though she cannot see him. The air is thick, too thick, like something unseen is watching, waiting, deciding. Her breath catches in her throat as her pulse hammers wildly beneath her skin. She knows she should run. She won't. The presence is intoxicating, electric, curling around her like invisible fingers tracing the length of her spine. A whisper, not of words, but of sensation, brushes against the shell of her ear. A shiver rips through her body, her fists clenching against the flood of something she dares not name. They told her to fear this. They said his love was poison wrapped in silk, sweet enough to drink willingly, but never without cost. That those who tasted it never returned whole. That they would never want to. Asmodeus. His name is stitched into the fabric of nightmares, whispered in confession soaked with regret and longing. He does not break hearts. He consumes them. There is no love like his, no touch that does not sear, no kiss that does not burn. And yet, they call for him in the dead of night. They write their warnings in scripture and song, but the stories betray them. They do not speak of horror alone. They speak of hunger, of passion that devours, of something so raw and violent that no prayer can wash it away. The bride who falls victim to his grasp does not cry out in terror, no, her cries are of something else. Something dark. Something damning. They do not say these things in the open, but the ink does not lie. In the old stories, they tell of the women who vanished into the night, of the men who wasted away, haunted by dreams too vivid to be mere fantasy. They woke gasping, sweat-drenched, the taste of lips that were never real lingering on their tongues. And when they died, because they always died, their hands were curled into fists over their hearts, as if trying to hold onto something that had already slipped through their fingers. The scholars scoff, calling it hysteria, calling it sickness, calling it anything but what it is. Love. Not the love sung about in wedding halls, clean and proper and meant for holy hands. No. This love is ruinous, corrupting. It leaves bruises, invisible but deep, impossible to mend. It lingers in the marrow, twisting the soul, turning every other touch into ash. He loves like fire. He loves like a storm. He loves like the end of all things. And yet, there are those who still call for him. Not with words, but with the ache that no human lover can ease, with the longing that no mortal hand can satisfy. They go to their beds alone, and yet, in the empty spaces between sleep and waking, they are not alone at all. Because he listens. And he always comes. The first scream shatters the cold morning air. It is raw, animalistic, born not from the body but from the soul, torn from the depths of something primal and desperate. The crowd shifts, eyes locked on the wooden stake driven into the frozen earth, where she writhes against the ropes cutting into her flesh. She is no longer a woman. She is a specter of fear, a warning wrapped in human skin. The priest steps forward, his voice steady but his fingers trembling against the worn leather of his Bible. Who gave you the name? His words cut through the murmurs, the whispers, the shifting feet of those who do not want to be here but cannot look away. She does not answer. The firewood piled at her feet is still dry. It has not yet been kissed by flame, but the scent of burning already lingers in the air. It is the scent of expectation, of inevitability. Another scream. This one from her throat, choked and uneven, but not in terror. In rage. Asmodeus, she breathes. The name slides from her lips like a curse, like a prayer, like something between the two. A shudder ripples through the crowd, unseen but felt. It slithers through their bones, settles in the marrow. The name was never meant to be spoken aloud. The priest recoils, stepping back as though her voice alone might scorch him. The demon of lust, he spits, his disgust masking something else. Something closer to fear. They know his name. They have always known his name. It was written in the confessions, in the testimony scratched onto parchment by shaking hands. He came to them in the night, they said. He whispered into their ears when the moon was high, pressed his invisible hands against their flesh, filled their bodies with fevered hunger and left them gasping. They wept in the morning, knelt on hard wooden floors and begged to be cleansed. But the priests did not forgive. They saw the marks on the skin, the heat behind the eyes, the way their bodies trembled when they spoke his name. And so, the fires were built. The nooses were tied. The water was made ready to see if it would claim them or reject them. Who brought you to him? The priest's voice is sharper now, his certainty returning with the weight of the crowd behind him. She laughs. It is a broken, hollow thing, filled with something that no prayer can smother. Her lips curve in something that is not a smile but carries the ghost of one. You did. Silence. Thick. Suffocating. The crowd does not understand, but they feel the truth in her words. It is not the witches who summon him. It is not the whispers of covens beneath the full moon. It is the fear, the repression, the shame that wraps itself around desire like iron chains. It is the endless sermon's warning of temptation, the eyes that dart away when flesh is exposed, the hands that shake with guilt in the dark. They have fed him. And now they seek to burn the evidence. The torch is lowered. The fire catches. The ropes blacken, curl, snap. The last thing they hear before the flames devour her is laughter. The candles burn low, wax pooling like spilled blood on the cold stone floor. Shadows stretch and twist along the damp walls, their movements unnatural, deliberate, as if something unseen breathes just beyond the edges of the light. The air is thick, too thick, with the scent of musk, sweat, and something far sweeter. Something rotting. A single voice rises, low and trembling, chanting in a language long buried beneath the weight of centuries. The syllables slither, coiling through the air like smoke, like a living thing. They kneel before the altar, bodies shrouded in darkness, their faces hidden behind masks that are less for anonymity and more for protection, protection from the thing they have summoned, the thing they have begged to hear them. A presence looms. It does not step from the darkness. It does not need to. It is the darkness. It settles into the spaces between their bones, fills the hollows of their chests, pulses behind their eyes. A hand, a human hand, reaches toward the altar. It is shaking, fingers slick with something too dark to be oil. An offering. The air itself seems to shudder. The room tightens, as if reality is shrinking, folding in on itself, collapsing beneath the weight of something too vast, too old, too hungry. And then, laughter. Soft at first, teasing. The kind of laughter that spills from lips brushing against a trembling ear in the dark. Then deeper, richer, until it is a soundless vibration rippling through their very atoms. It does not echo in the chamber, because it is not coming from a single place. It is inside them. A voice follows, sliding beneath the skin, whispering things that make their bodies tremble, not with fear, but with something far worse. Something they do not want to name. Their God has come. No records exist of what happened in that chamber, beneath that forgotten church, on that night when the air split open and something ancient slithered through. But the bodies were found weeks later. Their faces frozen in ecstasy. The candlelight flickers, but there is no wind. The chamber is silent, too silent. Not the peaceful kind, but the suffocating kind, the kind that makes the skin prickle and the lungs tighten, as if the air itself is waiting. Hooded figures stand in a perfect circle, their faces swallowed by shadow, their hands clasped. In the center, a sigil is carved into the cold stone floor, its grooves filled with something dark, something wet. The scent of it, iron, salt, life, clings to the damp air. A single voice breaks the silence, low and rhythmic, each word sinking into the stillness like a stone dropped into black water. Another voice joins. Then another. Until the chamber trembles beneath the weight of their chorus. It is not a song. It is not a prayer. It is a demand. Something shifts. Not in the room. In them. Their chests grow tight, their pulses hammer against their ribs. A sensation spreads through their limbs, not pain, not pleasure, but something between, something raw, something unspeakable. Their fingers twitch, their spines arch, their lips part without command. The chant does not falter. It cannot. A shadow moves where there should be none. The air thickens. The walls seem to breathe. The flickering flames stretch unnaturally high, casting distorted shapes that should not exist. A presence coils around them, threading through their minds like fingers through hair. It does not speak in words. It speaks in sensation. Heat spreads through their veins, slow and consuming, filling every hollow space, igniting something ancient in their marrow. Their thoughts are no longer their own. desire, hunger, power, each twisting into the next, inseparable, undeniable. A breath, cold and searing, brushes against their necks, though no one has moved. Then the laughter. It does not echo, because it is not in the air. It is inside them, rattling in their bones, licking at the edges of their consciousness, peeling away the last fragile layers of restraint. It knows them. It always has. One by one, their knees buckle. The sigil pulses. The ritual is complete. And Asmodeus watches. The candle sputtered in the chapel's suffocating darkness, its feeble glow painting trembling shadows along the stone walls. Father Gabriel pressed his forehead to the damp wooden altar, lips moving in frantic prayer, but the words felt hollow, empty, swallowed by the weight of something unseen. The air was thick, cloying, sweet, like perfume, like rot. It pressed against his skin, coiling in the hollow of his throat. He knew he was not alone. A whisper slithered through the silence. It was not a sound, not really, it was a presence, curling against the edges of his mind, stroking the fragile places where doubt and desire intertwined. The voice did not speak in words, but in sensation, warm breath against his ear, ghostly fingers trailing the nape of his neck. His pulse roared, a betrayer's drum in his chest. He gripped the cross around his neck until the metal bit into his palm. In the name of Christ, he rasped, "Begone!" Laughter. Not loud, not harsh, no, it was something worse. Low, indulgent, amused. A sound that knew him, that had always known him. He squeezed his eyes shut, but the darkness behind his lids was worse than the one before him. In it, he saw flashes, bare flesh, tangled limbs, bodies writhing, mouths parting in voiceless pleasure. His own breath came uneven, shame heating his skin. He did not need to see the demon to know its name. Asmodeus. The name was sin itself, a taste of honey laced with poison. The scriptures called him the prince of lust, the corrupter, the one who watched men of faith with a patient, knowing smile. He did not tempt like the lesser demons, did not shriek and claw. He did not need to. He waited. He watched. He whispered. Father Gabriel clenched his teeth, forcing himself upright. His cassock clung to his back, damp with sweat. "You will not have me," he swore, his voice hoarse. The whisper coiled around him, tightening, teasing. "I already do." His vision blurred. The chapel walls seemed to pulse, the flickering candlelight stretching unnatural shadows along the floor. He staggered back, fingers fumbling for the vial of holy water at his belt. Cold fingers, no, not fingers, something else, traced his wrist. His grip faltered, the vial slipping, shattering against the stone. The scent of myrrh and blood filled the air. The darkness pressed closer. He fell to his knees. A breath against his lips. His own voice, but not his own words. "I want," he bit down on the sentence, tasting blood. "No." With the last of his strength, he reached for the crucifix at his chest, pressing it against his skin until the pain cut through the haze. He forced himself to speak, to command, not plead. "The Lord rebuke thee." The laughter did not stop. It only grew softer, more intimate. But the presence began to fade, unraveling like silk slipping through fingers. The candle extinguished. Cold air rushed into the space where the heat had been. And then, nothing. The silence stretched, empty, hollow. Father Gabriel remained where he was, trembling, his nails biting into the wood beneath him. He had won. But in the lingering darkness, in the echo of that knowing laughter, he understood the truth. Asmodeus was never truly gone. He was waiting. The room is thick with the stench of incense, its smoke curling and twisting like something alive. There's a pulse in the air, a hum, faint but undeniable, like the vibration of 1,000 whispered secrets, just out of reach. A single candle flickers on the altar, casting long, distorted shadows that dance on the walls. The symbols carved into the floor seem to shift with every blink, their lines trembling as if they are alive, aware. A figure stands at the center of the room, a person, no, not just a person, but something more, something drawn into the darkness. The eyes that meet the candlelight burn with feverish intensity, a wild, unrelenting hunger. There is no fear in them, not anymore. There is only need, a need that stretches into the very fabric of the night. They whisper a name, Asmodeus. The name does not sound like words, but like a call, a summoning. The syllables fall from the lips like a lover's plea, soft and seductive, yet tainted with desperation. The air around them thickens, trembles. The shadows flicker closer, tighter, as if the room itself is holding its breath. For a moment, it is quiet, too quiet. Then, a shift, a crackle of energy that feels like static in the bones, electricity in the veins. The temperature drops, and a dark, velvet presence floods the space. It is not seen, not yet, but it is felt, an all-encompassing weight in the chest, a pressure on the skin. He's here. A laugh, quiet but unmistakable, curls through the silence. The figure smiles. They have called him, the demon of lust, the one who slithers through the cracks of morality, of sin. Asmodeus. To some, a temptation, a myth, to others, a dark, inevitable reality. It does not matter what they believe, their fate was sealed the moment they uttered his name. The ritual is simple, almost too easy. A few words, an offering of flesh and blood, the right sigils burned into the skin. It is a dance, a game, a bending of the rules that only the desperate, or the foolish, would play. Yet here they are, standing in the middle of the circle, eyes wide, breath quick, waiting. Waiting for what? For him to manifest? For the answers to all that they have been yearning for? The truth behind their desires, their obsessions? There is no returning once the door is opened. In the quiet space between moments, the figure feels it, the connection. It's a thread, thin as gossamer, yet pulling taut with every heartbeat. They are tethered to him now, bound by something they cannot name, cannot explain. Asmodeus does not give, he takes. He is not a being of mercy, but of want, his will woven into the fabric of their desires, their cravings. The blood that flows through their veins is no longer entirely their own. It carries something darker, something raw. He is inside them now. The shadows stretch across the floor, moving closer, as if they are aware of the moment of consummation. A soft breath of wind passes over the figure's skin, a cold caress that raises goosebumps. A hand, thin, cold, unnatural, brushes across their neck. The figure flinches, but does not pull away. They never pull away. The temperature plummets further, and then, in a heartbeat, everything shifts. The presence is no longer invisible. It is here, standing beside them, its weight pulling the air from their lungs. They don't look at him, not yet. They know better. The sight of him is not for weak eyes. No, better to feel him first, better to succumb to his power before allowing the rest of the world to see his true form. He doesn't appear in the way they imagined, but he is here. His presence is everywhere now, against their skin, in their breath, their pulse, their thoughts. His will floods their body like fire, like drowning, like something too big to contain. The ritual was supposed to be a transaction, a pact, a promise of pleasure or power. But now they understand, there is no such thing as control with Asmodeus. There is only submission. His whispers are an intoxicating blur in their mind, sweet and venomous. More, he hums, though the words are not spoken, they are felt. It is not an invitation, not a plea. It is a demand. The figure's hand trembles, the blood pumping in their veins, their skin burning. The hunger, the craving, their body betrays them, responds to the call, to the overwhelming need that is now a part of them. They are no longer just themselves. They are vessels, they are puppets, they are his. But even as they surrender, even as they give everything they have, they feel it, the horror creeping at the edges of their mind. This is not just a moment of pleasure. This is not just an indulgence. It is a sacrifice. They are offering their soul, piece by piece, to him. And they are not sure they want to stop. A laugh, dark and suffocating, slithers through the air, curling around their heart. His laugh. The laugh of a being who has seen it all, the hunger of men, the obsessions, the moral corruption of the world. He knows it all, and yet, he wants more. He always wants more. The figure's fingers curl into a fist, the grip tight, like they could hold on to something, anything, before they are pulled further into the abyss. But it's too late. Asmodeus is not just a demon. He is the demon. His influence has always been here, a quiet, subtle, waiting for the moment when the door would crack open, when the soul would fall. They are nothing now but a whisper in the dark, a whisper to Asmodeus. And he is listening. The screen is dark, but there's something there. You can feel it in the air, the weight of the silence, the tension building like an electrical storm. Slowly, the image sharpens, revealing the flicker of a candle, a tremor in the light. Shadows stretch and sway unnaturally, as though they are alive, whispering promises of things that cannot be unseen. Then, a figure steps forward. A silhouette at first, then a face, too perfect, too immaculate, like something out of a fevered dream. It is the face of someone you should know, someone familiar, yet the emptiness in their eyes makes it clear they are no longer human. His lips curl into a smile that doesn't belong on a human mouth. He's here. Asmodeus. There's no mistaking it. Not the dark power radiating from him, not the way the room seems to bend and twist with his presence. He is a demon, but not just any demon. He is lust, he is desire incarnate, and his very existence twists everything around him into something darker, something you can't resist even as you try to recoil. His laugh, soft at first, like the rasp of dry leaves in the wind, sends a chill down your spine. He's playing, toying with you. Toying with everyone. His very presence, his mere existence, changes the rules of the world. The film shifts and sways, as though it cannot contain him. It wants to pull you in, to show you what he can do, but it can't stop itself from trembling in fear. With every scene, he gets closer, the intensity rising. The protagonist knows something is wrong. They see his eyes, too dark, too knowing. He speaks, but his words are never reassuring. He speaks of power, of influence, of things that seem so appealing even as they twist your mind. It's always a choice in these moments, surrender or fight. But fighting him is never the right answer. The camera zooms in on the protagonist's face, their breath shallow, eyes wide, and you can see it, they're in a turmoil. They are losing the battle. And as much as they fight it, you know they will fall into his hands. You know they are already his. The room is suffocating now. It's not just the claustrophobia of the space around them, it's the weight of his eyes on their soul. Asmodeus doesn't need to touch you to make you feel him. He touches you with every glance, every word that falls from his lips. He sinks into your mind, makes you question what's real, what's wrong, what's right. You wonder if you're still yourself. The way the camera shifts, how the protagonist's movements slow, their body becoming a puppet, he's in their blood now. He's in everyone's blood. Asmodeus isn't just a demon of lust, he's a demon of control. You see it in the scenes where the characters start giving in to temptation, each one more desperate, more willing to fall, more eager to surrender. The light dims, and the fire in their eyes grows colder, darker. It's as if their very humanity slips away. Asmodeus stands at the center of it all. He is the center. He's the focus, the reason, the desire that pushes everyone forward, even as they spiral into the abyss. He watches, calculating, waiting. You can almost hear him whispering to the viewer now, "Come closer." His voice drips with sweet venom. Every word, every note of his laughter fills your chest with something unnameable, something you wish you could escape from, but it's too late. You can't escape. In another scene, a ritual takes place. The moon is full, the chants grow louder. Asmodeus is summoned. But this time, there's no candlelight, no playful teasing, he emerges from the shadows like a predator, and you can feel the heat radiating from him, an undeniable force that sinks into the skin, into the bones. The protagonist doesn't realize it yet, but they are already his. The ritual is not for power, it is for sacrifice. The moment of surrender. It's not an invitation. It's a command. The scene is not just about fear. It's about something else, something deeper, darker, pulling at the soul. It's the moment when the viewer knows they should look away, but they don't. They can't. Because Asmodeus is so magnetic, so captivating, so all-consuming that they forget what they were afraid of. They only feel the pull of him. The camera hovers over the protagonist's face, the conflict in their eyes, the desire that has overtaken them. The struggle is there, yes, but it's futile. And you can feel it, too. You can feel the edge of temptation whispering in your own ear. In the final act, Asmodeus makes his move. It's not loud or grand, there are no sudden explosions or dramatic effects. It's silent, slow, and devastating. He leans close to the protagonist, his breath hot on their skin, a hand caressing their cheek like the brush of a lover's touch. His voice is soft, soothing, the very definition of control. His eyes pierce the protagonist's soul. "You belong to me now," he says. And as much as they try to pull away, they cannot. They are his. They always were. The protagonist's final look is not one of defiance, not one of terror. It is acceptance, surrender. Asmodeus does not need to fight to win. He does not need to force anyone. His power is in the offering. His power is in the inevitability. And when the screen fades to black, when the credits roll, you are left with one thing, the feeling that somehow, somewhere, Asmodeus is still watching. Waiting. And you wonder, as you leave the theater or turn off the TV, how much of him is still inside of you. The screen flickers to life, the cold blue glow illuminating the room like an ancient curse. The character stands on the edge of a darkened city, the wind howling as if the very earth itself is trying to warn them. In the distance, the faintest glow flickers, almost imperceptible, but it's there. A beacon of something unnatural, something that pulls at the soul. The character's heart beats faster, the air thickening as though it too is afraid. And then, it hits, the unmistakable, suffocating presence of Asmodeus. His name hasn't even been spoken, yet you can feel him. You can feel the tension in the air, the subtle shift, the disturbance. The player's pulse races. It's not a choice anymore, they're already deep in it. The demon, the temptation, has made himself known. A whisper in the wind, a flicker in the shadows. The game world has become a twisted reflection of the desires buried deep within, and he is the embodiment of it. Asmodeus doesn't need to show himself completely to leave his mark. His presence wraps itself around every moment, every decision the player makes. He doesn't need to raise his hand in anger. The mere idea of him changes everything, the choices seem harder, the stakes higher, the paths darker. His influence lingers even in the most innocent of actions. It doesn't matter how much you try to fight. His essence seeps into your thoughts, your desires, your very gameplay. You begin to question your own choices. Every yes feels like a betrayal, every no feels like a missed opportunity. You're constantly on edge, not knowing if you're following the path you should, or the path is guiding you to. In one scene, the player's character enters a dungeon, the walls slick with moss, the air heavy with decay. You hear it before you see it, the faint sound of whispering, promises made from the darkness. The shadows seem to shift as if alive, swirling around the character, drawing them closer to the heart of the dungeon. You can feel the pulse of something ancient. Something powerful. Something wrong. And then, in the distance, you hear it, his voice, barely a whisper, but it's enough. Come closer, let me show you what you desire most. It's not just the words, it's the feeling they create. It's the slow, aching pull. It's the way your character moves forward, unable to resist. You, as the player, don't want to move, but you have no choice. He's inside your mind now, and you can't fight it. The dungeon seems endless now, the walls closing in tighter, suffocating. Every turn, every corner, a promise of something deeper, darker. The game's music shifts, from hauntingly sweet to a low, unsettling hum. You know you're getting closer. You don't want to get closer. But you do anyway. And then, there he is. Asmodeus doesn't appear like some grotesque, towering demon. No. He is perfect. He stands in the center of a vast chamber, bathed in the flickering light of strange, otherworldly flames. His eyes are dark, infinite pools that seem to pierce your soul. He doesn't have to say anything, his presence alone is enough. It's like you're drowning in him. Every word that follows feels like an inevitable death. You've come far, his voice murmurs, an unsettling combination of soothing and terrifying. But you are weak. All this time, you've sought power, haven't you? You've sought to bend the world to your will. But it's already mine. It always was. The player is faced with a choice: accept his power, succumb to the temptation, or continue to fight. But the choice isn't truly theirs. Not really. Asmodeus has already worked his influence into your mind, into the very fabric of the game itself. The longer you play, the harder it becomes to resist him. The screen flickers with images of what he promises, everything the character has ever wanted. The power to rule. The beauty to be adored. The satisfaction to control. You can almost taste it. And yet, the game doesn't just stop there. The tension builds, tightening with every choice, every step forward. The more the player resists, the more intense his presence becomes. His voice, soft but sharp, calling to you again, each word twisting deeper into your thoughts. He's in your head now. You can't escape him. You know that you will give in, sooner or later. He is not merely a villain. He is an inevitability. The world around you starts to crumble as you make your decisions, torn between what you know is right and the promises he's whispered into your ear. The character's moral compass, once clear, is now muddled, pulled in every direction by 1,000 desires, 1,000 fears. You know what Asmodeus offers, and it's too tempting to resist. It's not about right or wrong anymore, it's about desire. And Asmodeus is the one who shows you just how far you can go. Each fight, each battle, feels smaller now. Even when you win, it feels like you've lost. Because somewhere deep inside, you know what's coming. You know that in the end, it's not about saving the world, it's about giving in. When you finally face him again, after all the pain, all the suffering, after everything you've fought for, there's no satisfaction in defeating him. There's only the cold emptiness of realizing that he was always going to win. He doesn't need to kill you, to overpower you. All he needs is your consent. And in the end, your character gives it. Asmodeus doesn't just live in the game, he lives in the very essence of every choice, every dark corner of the player's mind. He is the villain, but he is also the temptation. He is not a character you can defeat. He is the feeling that haunts you long after the game is over. You can turn off the screen. You can walk away. But he's already inside you. He always was. And somewhere, in the darkness of the game's code, he waits for you to come back. The room is suffocating. The walls seem to close in, breathing with the rhythm of something alive, something waiting. Your eyes dart around, but there's nothing, no one. Yet the air feels thick, heavy with something you can't quite place. It's a presence, like a shadow that lingers just beyond your reach, too close to ignore. The hair on the back of your neck prickles, and in the silence, a voice whispers. It's not loud. It's not even clear. But you feel it deep in your bones. I'm watching you. For a moment, you convince yourself it's nothing. Just your mind playing tricks. But that feeling, that growing pressure, it's real. And you can't escape it. It follows you, lingers behind every corner, every reflection in the glass. There's something ancient in this presence, something unshakable, as if it has always been here, quietly waiting for you to realize it. Asmodeus. The name doesn't need to be spoken aloud. The mere thought of him distorts the air around you, tightening your chest, flooding your mind with visions of temptation, power, and the darkness you long to deny. His presence doesn't scream, doesn't claw at you with monstrous force. No, it's subtle. Quiet. But that's what makes it worse. It seeps into your skin, into your thoughts, burrowing deep within, until you no longer know where you end and it begins. And that's where the horror lies. In the deepest corners of psychological horror, it's not the monster in the shadows that torments you. It's the whispers, the creeping thoughts, the insidious pull that Asmodeus embodies. He is the force that whispers your darkest desires into your ear, turning them into something grotesque, something you can't turn away from. The horror isn't in the things he shows you, it's in what he makes you see. What he makes you want. His power doesn't lie in his appearance, his actions, or his form, it lies in his ability to control your mind, to twist your desires into something unrecognizable. The worst part is that you want it. You don't realize it at first, but somewhere along the way, you start to listen. You start to wonder. And that's when it begins. You're not just afraid anymore. You're complicit. Asmodeus doesn't need to hold you down. He doesn't need to force you into submission. He doesn't even need to reveal himself. All he needs is the quiet agreement, the subtle nod to your darkest desires, the soft surrender to the truth he presents. Everything you've ever wanted is just one step away. All you have to do is take it. It's an agonizing tug-of-war, this slow suffocation of the mind. With each passing moment, you feel yourself slipping further into his grasp. Your thoughts twist, contort into something you don't recognize, as if every decision you make is guided by a hand you can't see but you can feel, the hand of Asmodeus, pressing against your soul, whispering into your ear that nothing matters except the pursuit of your deepest cravings. The more you resist, the stronger his grip becomes. You're drowning in a flood of desire, drowning in the knowledge that you'll never be the same again. The worst part isn't that you've lost control, it's that you want to. Every psychological horror rooted in Asmodeus feeds on this, the slow, terrifying realization that you're no longer in control of your own mind. The darkness isn't a monster, it's you. It's the desires you bury deep inside yourself, the parts of you that you don't want anyone to see. But Asmodeus sees them, and he isn't content to let them remain hidden. He'll bring them to the surface in ways you never expected. It doesn't matter that you're the hero, the victim, the bystander. What matters is that you are human. And your humanity is exactly what he needs to destroy. He does this through the simplest of things. The flickering lights. The sudden coldness in the air. The fleeting moments where you feel like you're being watched. The face in the reflection of the window that doesn't belong to you. It starts with a whisper and ends with a scream. Because you know that the darkness is already inside you, already twisting your mind into something unrecognizable. You don't need Asmodeus to show himself to terrify you. He doesn't need to claw his way out of the shadows. His power lies in the unsettling fact that you want to follow him, that you've always been drawn to him. That you'll never stop questioning whether it's you who is the true monster, not him. There's something deeply disturbing about the idea that we are both the victim and the perpetrator in psychological horror. We are the ones who willingly open the door, even as we know something terrible waits on the other side. Asmodeus doesn't just represent external evil. He represents the evil we carry inside ourselves, the selfishness, the pride, the darkness that festers under the surface. His true horror is not in what he forces you to see, but in what you choose to see. What you choose to become. And when you stare into the abyss, you realize it's never just the abyss staring back. It's you. His ability to influence in fiction, to wrap his presence around every twisted thought and fleeting desire, is what keeps him terrifying. He is the horror that never stops because it doesn't need to. He doesn't need to appear as some grotesque, otherworldly being. He is the reflection in the mirror, the voice in your mind, the nagging thought that you can't shake. The terror isn't in his form, it's in what he makes you do with what you know. What you're willing to sacrifice for that fleeting taste of forbidden fruit. And that, more than any monstrous image, is what keeps the fear alive. Asmodeus isn't just a demon. He's the temptation we all face, the whisper of what we want most, whether we like it or not. And the terror is in the realization that, given the right push, we would all fall. The darkness presses in, swallowing everything in its wake, but there is no sound. No movement. Just a distant, echoing laugh, hollow and cruel, growing louder, closer. It's a sound that seems to vibrate through your very bones, shattering the silence and making your heart race. The walls pulse, alive with something, and then, a flash of light. A figure appears in the corner of your eye, moving with the subtlety of a shadow, slipping through cracks in the world you thought you knew. Asmodeus. Not in the form you expected, not as the ancient, towering figure of myth, draped in regal finery and dripping with power. No, this is something different, something far more dangerous. He's not bound by time. He's not limited to one form. He shifts, molds himself, adapts to every era, every belief, every generation's deepest fears and desires. His face changes, but his essence remains the same, a demon of lust, of temptation, of ruin. He is timeless, relentless, and as old as sin itself. From the first whispers of Asmodeus' name, he was not a singular entity. He was the embodiment of mankind's deepest urges, desires so raw and primal that they could not be contained by one form. In the ancient world, when he first slithered from the underworld, he wore the face of seduction, of control. He was the demon whose very name sent shivers down the spine of the pious, whose influence was seen in the temptation of kings, the fall of empires. Back then, he was a force, untouchable, unstoppable, a whispered legend that struck fear into the hearts of men. But now he's something more. The evolution of Asmodeus is not one of shape alone, it is the evolution of humanity's desires, fears, and failings. In the past, he was the clear villain, the creature who took form as the embodiment of all forbidden lusts, appearing to those who were weak enough to succumb to temptation. His power was raw, untamed. He was a demon who reveled in destruction, his lust tied to the very fabric of humanity's downfall. In those times, he stood tall, an ancient force, omnipotent in his pursuit of chaos. But the world changed. The rise of religion, the growth of the written word, the spread of knowledge, all of these forces took shape in ways no one could predict. And so, Asmodeus changed with them. No longer just a shadowy figure, an ancient deity feared by those who believed in his power, he became a symbol that mirrored the darkest parts of human nature. No longer content to simply appear as a terrifying force, Asmodeus now took on new forms, slipping into the corners of everyday life, bending the very fabric of human psychology to his will. As society evolved, so too did he. In the age of reason, when science and logic ruled the minds of men, he shifted. He no longer needed to be a figure of the past, he became a part of the very thoughts and impulses that drive humanity. He is the fleeting thought in the back of your mind, the whisper when you're alone, the pressure when you stand on the precipice of a decision that could change your life forever. He is no longer simply the demon of the flesh. He is the demon of the mind. And that is where he is most dangerous. You see, Asmodeus no longer needs to show himself in the conventional sense. He is subtle. He is cunning. He seeps into the psyche, twisting desires into obsessions, amplifying fears into nightmares. As the centuries passed, he became less a figure of terror and more an insidious presence, threading his influence through art, literature, entertainment, and, perhaps most importantly, through the screens that now dominate our lives. He has evolved into the symbol of everything we want, but no, we shouldn't. His power no longer lies in his physical form, it is now the whispers in your ear at 3 a.m., the pressure that grows heavier with every passing thought of greed, lust, and pride. In the modern era, Asmodeus is no longer just a name, he's a feeling. A longing. A call to something darker, something forbidden. He thrives in the darkness of the internet, the shadows of addiction, the ever-present lure of power, wealth, and sexual desire that permeates our society. He is not a demon you can see. He is the one you can't escape. He is in the ads you scroll past, the stories you read late at night, the hidden desires you don't speak aloud. He's in the loneliness, the isolation, the self-loathing that you try to suppress, but it's always there, lurking just beneath the surface. His evolution is not just a reflection of the changing world. It is a response to it. He adapts. As the human race becomes more and more disconnected from its roots, more immersed in a world of technology and fleeting distractions, Asmodeus has become the perfect demon for the modern age. He no longer takes your soul through temptation alone, he takes it through apathy, through disconnection, through the numbing of the senses. He is the figure you can't escape, the one you never see coming, the one who's always just one click away. And this is the true horror of Asmodeus, that he isn't bound to one face, one body, one form. He is the very manifestation of the desires and fears we cannot face, and as the world shifts, so does he. He evolves because he has to, because to survive, he must be as elusive as the very nature of human sin itself. He is no longer the demon who stands tall in the shadows. He is the shadow. You can't fight him because he is already inside of you, creeping beneath the surface, feeding on the parts of yourself you refuse to acknowledge. The changing face of Asmodeus is not just the face of a demon. It is the face of every temptation we've ever faced, every vice we've ever surrendered to, every boundary we've ever crossed. And as humanity evolves, so too will he. Every generation will face him, but no generation will ever truly defeat him. For when Asmodeus changes, he does not disappear. He becomes more. And you, too, will become more afraid, more tempted, more consumed by the very thing you can never outrun. The demon will always change, but it will always remain the same. And in that constant evolution lies the true terror. The candle flickers, casting grotesque shadows that stretch across the cold stone walls. Silence smothers the room, thick and oppressive, yet every inch of the air feels charged. It's in the stillness that something stirs, a faint rustling from the shadows, something slithering, a presence you cannot name, but it is there, circling, waiting. It calls to you, not with words, but with an unbearable yearning that coils inside you, tightening your chest, making every breath feel like a betrayal. Is it real? The question hangs in the air like a thundercloud, pregnant with tension. You know the answer but refuse to face it. You know the name, Asmodeus. You know, don't you? He's not just a story whispered in ancient tongues, a demon of lust and sin consigned to the pages of old texts. No, he's something more. He's something that slips through the cracks of history, unnoticed at first, until you realize it's always been there, always watching, always waiting. And now he's real, standing in the room with you, a phantom from the depths of your darkest desires. So, was Asmodeus merely a myth? A fairy tale spun by frightened monks? The devil dressed in the cloak of lust and power, nothing more than a creature birthed from the minds of men who feared their own passions. To dismiss him as such would be foolish. For myths, as we call them, are not always born of fantasy. Sometimes, they are born of a truth too raw, too terrifying to face. They are the skeletons rattling in the closet, the whispers in the wind, the nagging feeling that there is something more to the world than what we can see with our eyes. History, if you look closely, doesn't tell us Asmodeus was just a demon created to scare children. No, the accounts are too varied, too widespread, too powerful in their consistency. From the Bible to the Talmud, from the ancient Mesopotamians to the medieval Christian church, Asmodeus is a presence. Not a fleeting one, but a persistent one, a force that threads its way through cultures and religions, ever present, ever powerful. Can something merely a myth leave such a trail through time, etched into the very fabric of human history? The accounts of Asmodeus throughout time are unsettling in their similarity. He is not just a lustful spirit, a seducer of kings and queens. He is a demon of power, of influence, of chaos, and of destruction. The very thing he represents, the overwhelming force of desire unchecked, is as real as the blood that pulses through your veins. Lust is not an abstract concept, it is a visceral hunger that gnaws at the soul. Power is not a distant illusion, it's the hunger that drives wars, collapses civilizations, rips families apart. And in these, Asmodeus thrives. But to speak of Asmodeus purely in terms of lust, of sexual desire, is to misunderstand the true depth of his influence. Lust, yes, it is his domain, but lust in the truest sense, the insatiable craving for control, for indulgence, for the obliteration of any boundary that seeks to restrain the self. He is the demon of those who would sell their souls for fleeting pleasure, for power over others, for the release of all that is repressed and forbidden. He is the demon of the heart's darkest wants. It's this hunger, this need, that makes Asmodeus terrifying. Lust, in all its forms, is something we cannot escape, no matter how hard we try. Asmodeus is the reflection of that inability to escape, the embodiment of that desire you feel clawing at your insides, forcing you to make choices you know are wrong, but do them anyway. But let us not mistake him for a simple creature of the flesh. He is the force behind every whisper that tempts you to cross the line, to break the rules. His influence is not bound by time or place. Where the boundaries of morality are stretched, Asmodeus is there, pulling the strings, laughing in the background as humanity falls into its darkest, most destructive desires. He is the devil of lust, yes, but also of power, of greed, of the need to dominate and destroy. He is the puppet master, and you are the one who dances to his tune, whether you want to or not. Now compare him to other demons of desire, those creatures that haunt the minds of men. Compare him to Lilith, to succubi, to the countless others who have taken root in folklore. What do they all have in common? The manipulation of the human soul through its darkest desires, yes. But Asmodeus? Asmodeus stands apart. Where Lilith whispers of rebellion and freedom, Asmodeus whispers of submission. He is not the seducer who offers liberation, he is the one who tempts you to surrender, to give in, to fall into the abyss. He does not seduce with the promise of power, but with the promise of control, the terrifying illusion that you are in charge, when in reality, he has already won. His power doesn't lie just in the act of temptation, it lies in the aftermath. It lies in the aftermath of the choices made, the destruction caused. While other demons of lust revel in the act of seduction, Asmodeus knows something deeper. He knows that the true power is not in the moment of indulgence, but in the aftermath. It's in the remorse, the shame, the self-loathing that follows. He feeds not just on the sin, but on the knowledge that the victim can never go back, can never undo what was done. He is a devil of no small measure. Not the whisper in your ear as you lie in bed, not the fleeting thought that crosses your mind. Asmodeus is the devil of empire builders, of those who would tear down worlds to see their own rise. He is the force behind the powerful and the corrupt. His is the reign of unchecked desire, of those who will stop at nothing to climb higher, to feed their hunger, even if it means dragging everyone down with them. So is Asmodeus merely a myth? Maybe. But myths are born from something. They are born from the fears we cannot face, from the things we cannot explain. The truth is, Asmodeus is far more than a myth. He is the reflection of all the worst parts of us, the parts we are too terrified to confront. The lust, the desire, the hunger for power that resides in every soul. Asmodeus is not just an ancient demon, he is the embodiment of the human condition. And whether we like it or not, he is here. Always has been. Always will be. The air is thick, heavy with the smell of incense and sweat, a twisted symphony of indulgence playing just beneath the surface. The candlelight trembles as if uncertain whether to burn bright or gutter out entirely. The shadows stretch across the walls, reaching out like desperate fingers, begging for something, someone, to feed them. And then, his eyes. You don't see them, but you feel them. You feel the weight of them like an invisible hand on your chest, pressing down, suffocating you. Asmodeus is there. Watching. Waiting. His influence drips from the walls, pools on the floor like a dark stain that can never be wiped away. The question isn't if he's real. The question is, what will you do when he claims you? Asmodeus' legacy is far from over. He's not a creature who fades with time, not a shadow that will disappear with the dawn. He's the one that keeps returning in new forms, new faces, drawing people closer with his promises of indulgence, of power, of fulfillment. He knows no end. He knows no escape. His face morphs, but his hunger, his insatiable thirst for domination over the soul, remains the same. As we move into the future, Asmodeus will remain a figure not confined to ancient texts or worn-out legends. He is the future of demonology, a dark force lurking in the corners of our rapidly changing world. Modern beliefs, shaped by technology and instant gratification, will only feed his power, magnifying his influence. As long as humanity remains trapped in its need for excess, in its hunger for dominance, Asmodeus will find a way to be present. He'll adapt, evolve, and, in a twisted sense, become even more potent as he feeds off the relentless pursuit of immediate satisfaction. you will find him not just in the shadows of religion, but in the glittering lights of cities, in the sterile glow of screens that feed you lies, in the dopamine hits that trickle down your spine every time you indulge in something forbidden. This is the future that Asmodeus controls, a world constantly chasing after something more, bigger, better, now. It is this lust for control, for possession, that will keep his name alive, that will keep his grip on the very fabric of society. He will be the voice whispering in your ear, urging you to take one more step, to cross one more line. In a world where boundaries are blurred and temptation is a click away, Asmodeus will thrive. He is not bound by time, by religion, or by tradition. His power lies in the truth that humanity has never truly shaken off its deepest urges. We still crave, we still want. And Asmodeus will be there to satisfy us, to claim us, to feed on us until we are nothing but shadows, empty husks of desire. But with his grip comes a cost. The lessons of Asmodeus are dark, unnerving. He does not bring pleasure without price. He does not offer fulfillment without destruction. The moral lessons he imparts are not gentle whispers but sharp, punishing truths. Lust, unchecked, destroys. Power, taken without conscience, consumes. Asmodeus is not just a figure of desire, he is a figure of consequence. Those who give in to him, those who allow themselves to be tempted by the empty promises he offers, will find themselves shattered by the very thing they sought. Asmodeus teaches us that the pursuit of indulgence, of unchecked desire, does not lead to liberation, but to ruin. It is not the pursuit of pleasure that fulfills us, it is the refusal to give in to the endless hunger that makes us whole. Yet, his legacy is not one solely of damnation. There is a lesson to be learned from him, even if it is a hard one. Asmodeus stands as a reminder of the price we pay for our desires. In a world that tells us to want more, to never stop reaching, he is the counterpoint, the warning, the reminder of the abyss that waits if we stray too far. He teaches us about the boundaries of human nature, about the darkness that resides inside us all. We cannot ignore the hunger. It is part of us. But we must choose how we feed it. Asmodeus does not give you a choice. He only consumes. He offers no redemption. And this is where his power lies. Not in the ability to seduce or to dominate, but in the illusion that he is the answer, the release from pain, the solution to the human condition. His power comes from the false belief that we are helpless, that we need him. The moment you think that he holds the key to your desires, to your happiness, you lose. And that is where his legacy lives on. Not in his ability to take, but in his ability to convince. To twist, to bend, to make you believe that the emptiness inside you can only be filled by him. Asmodeus is more than just a demon of lust. He is the embodiment of what happens when we surrender ourselves to the darkness. The danger he poses is not in his acts of temptation, it is in his ability to make us want those acts, to make us believe that we are worthy only of indulgence, of control, of pleasure at any cost. He is the reminder that what we want is not always what we need. And in that lies the most terrifying lesson of all. As we look to the future, to a world that is fast losing its grip on the line between right and wrong, Asmodeus will only grow stronger. His face may change, perhaps more subtle now, more insidious, camouflaged in the shiny distractions of modern life, but the hunger remains the same. And when we face him, when we encounter the deepest, darkest corners of our own desires, we will see him, just as we always have. Because, in the end, he is not the other. He is the part of us we refuse to face. He is the legacy of our own humanity.